Hi there, welcome to the Noah Presgrove case with an extremely important focus and topic of today. We're looking into one of the key party goers known as Mikey Lair that attended the party house on the Sunday, the day before Noah's death, and supposedly rode as a passenger with Noah in the back on the way down to the party Sunday afternoon. For Noah Presgrove, it was just another day returning back. For Mikey Lair, it was his first day going to the party. What happened in that space of time and onwards when at the party? What happened once Noah walked away? Are there any links or connections? Why was Mikey Lair so deeply impacted by the news of Noah's death and seeing it firsthand? And what effects could it have had on him onwards? The reason why this is an important topic and focus today is because unlike other party goers which struggled with the news of Noah and onwards, Mikey, in some way or another, was struggling with problems long before Noah's death, before the party had even taken place. To make it clear, from what's been said online, what Caden Pressey had brought up in some way or another, that Mikey has been dealing with PTSD, also known as post-traumatic stress disorder. And for Mikey to be going to a party where it's supposedly busy, noisy, the environment itself, the visuals, the sounds, could it have been triggering in any way? Could it have more impact to Mikey at the party and onwards? And like with Noah's death, any re-traumatization? That is what I want to focus on today. And I'll be giving examples. I'll be going in deep, looking at the causes, the effects, analysing how it could be for Mikey, as in before the party, his past, and then during the party, to get a more closer idea and perspective as to why things happened, and if there are links, if there's any physicality, if there was ever any aggression shown, verbal or physical, if there was ever any defensiveness, and if it ever rubbed off the wrong way, or Noah was caught in the middle of it when at the party. And then even after the death, any links or impacts, such as in the future when Mikey Lair was in trouble, when he was involved in co-joint robbery or to do with a stolen vehicle. How do you go from being a person of 16, 17 years of age at a party, supposedly innocent, but then down the line things can go wrong, mistakes can be made, it might even feel like things are spiraling out just a little bit. Some of it could link to the PTSD, and that's what I'm here to do, to try and understand how it can possibly link and the depth behind it. As for the pace of this video, it's going to be done in one take, one go. I only have some bullet points just in front of me in regard to before, during and after the party as reminders, so we can keep it structured, so it's not all over the place. Just want to say welcome if you're currently watching. Share your thoughts and live reactions in the live chat box on the right hand side of the screen there. And at any point or time, if you'd like to share additional thoughts, your own theories, as in what Mikey may have been going through at any point, what may have caused his PTSD, whether it had a major role at the party, and if it had an impact with Noah Presgrove as a crossover, be sure to drop a comment down below. Any questions, answers, whatever it is, just drop a comment down below under the video, as it will help with spreading awareness about the case and awareness about these situations and disorders and problems and struggles. If you do want to support the channel, just on the sideline, there are some links to follow down below. And more importantly, if you'd like to catch up on recent videos of mine, or you've missed out on anything to do with the Noah Presgrove case, don't worry. The full playlist is available, top right corner where the eye symbol is up there. And as well, if you click on that eye symbol with the drop down menu box beside the playlist underneath it, you'll also get some recent videos, what I've done, including the Mikey Lair focus in other ways. As said, this is going to be a series where we look at different partygoers from different angles, perspectives, and all of that. We've heard mentions of Caden Pressey needing therapy post-death of Noah. We've heard mentions of Jasmine Milan struggling at some point and maybe still with mental health related stuff. The odd person leaked it out about Jasmine, I think at one point trying to end things. So you can see the great impact it's had, direct or indirect, from Noah's case and Noah's death. You know, your friends or close to someone, the impact of it can be great. And whilst own problems and struggles can come from the case, the event with Noah, for someone like Mikey that has already been dealing with an invisible barrier and battle within before the party, there's a lot more going on there. And just like how we looked at the other theme of, if you have certain party goers that have come on in, present around Noah, before or into the future they commit crimes, and some are more violent, bad than others, it's like, for Noah Presgrove to be around such people like that, is it a safe environment to be in? Was Noah Presgrove at any point around bad influences, dangerous people, aggressive ones, where things could go wrong, where there could be a disagreement, a fight, a breakout, whether other partygoers were aware of it or not? And it's like, if Noah Presgrove walked off down the road heading east, did anyone follow afterwards who may have had issues, or they were capable of doing such things which weren't figured out or picked up on then, but became more known in the future when they got caught in other crimes and caught out? You know, the more bad people you're around, the more of a negative influence it can have on yourself, and more dangerous, the worse the outcome could be for yourself. Was that with Noah? Well, that theme has been talked about. Now we're dealing with the theme of, with no offence, possibly psychologically unstable individuals present around Noah. If you're around a psychologically unstable individual, it can have direct and side effects on yourself with how they treat you, what they do to you, verbal or physical. At times, it's not always meant. It doesn't define who they really are and how they really think about you. But other times, the darkness, the illness, the disorder can take over that person, and it's the trauma, it's the damage, it's the collateral damage that's doing the talking and the acting, and you might get caught up within it. They don't mean to at times. You will get exceptions where others do it with a form of intent. They can be dangerous to themselves, but also dangerous to other people. And that can cross over to some extent with PTSD in how they react, if they lash out, verbal or physical, if there is a trigger. If that happened at the party and Noah Presgrove was caught up within it all, one person's struggles could lead to Noah being on the receiving end of some kind of consequence, some kind of backlash, but unintentional, indirect, involuntary, or the darkness taking over on the spot. A person like Mikey Lair, we're not saying he's involved in Noah's death. We're not directly saying he knows something about Noah's death. It's about coming up with the theories and the ideas behind how someone who might have psychological issues in a place such as a party, and Noah Presgrove ends up being a victim in some way, maybe by someone or some other factor. Could you piece it all together? It may have not been planned out, premeditated, but in the moment, was it a form of murder? If that could be the case, was it a form of an accident or something gone too far? A form of manslaughter? And if any of that was possible, in any way would it link to Mikey Lair? Because look, we've done the focus on Jack Newton, and other people have done the focus on Avery Carter and so on. Let's focus on Mikey this time round. You could say, well, Mikey's innocent because he's with Caden and he's crying here and there. Crying doesn't always equal being innocent. Sometimes crying can be a sign of guilt or feeling responsible for something, or invisibly carrying the weight internally of something that you know or feel and no one else around does. And it crushes and crumbles you over time, or in a short space of time if it's very intense. Some of these are symptoms and themes of what we're going to be talking about today. But before I go any further, I just want to make it clear as a disclaimer that whilst this video focuses in on a particular party goer known as Mikey Lair, and whilst this focuses on the Noah Presgrove case, how causes and effects from the past can coincide with the party, and how it could lead or explain to Noah's death, maybe, and then the impacts in general post-death, whilst it is focused on the case specifically, at times I will likely use, in general, external examples of such as PTSD, symptoms, encounters, experiences, challenges, coping or struggling, factors like that, how it could apply to Mikey or just in general. The reason why at times I speak in general and use vague examples, because it is a bit of an umbrella. PTSD and CPTSD, two things can go hand in hand, both can happen. But as for how they're caused and the effects and some of the overlaps, it can vary in many different ways. And I'll try and make more sense of that later if you stick around to find out. But because me personally, I don't know exactly how or why Mikey has PTSD or how long he's really had it for, you could argue and say it's a bit of a guessing game, but nevertheless, there is still that opportunity to use a form of common sense, critical thinking. Whilst I myself may not have PTSD, in terms of that inner voice and that inner mechanism, I can only imagine what it could be like for someone that is going through that, experiencing trauma, re-experiencing past events and all the symptoms that can go along with it. So I want to make it clear that I'm no massive expert on this, and there's a lot of depth to it, okay? But I'm going to do the best that I can to try and make sense of the situation and Mikey and Noah, the party itself, and on a general basis. And on the sideline, well, first of all, it's important to acknowledge that the aim is to learn about the case, learn about the possible motives, factors, and all that to consider. And then on the sideline, hopefully this video helps people watching in some way or another, whether that be in learning about the case, different perspectives, or if it's along the lines of, if it applies to you, or you know of someone else that may have certain struggles and it may cross over with what's talked about in today's video. Hopefully it does help a little bit. Well, of course, it's important to know, as a disclaimer, to make it very clear, what I'm going to be talking about today could be triggering for some people. And maybe if people who might have PTSD, this video, just as a heads up warning, that's what I'm going to be talking about, and with examples mentioned and so on. Without getting too deep, I just wanted to give you a warning right now. So if at any point or time it gets too much, it gets overwhelming, it gets too intense, or what's being talked about brings up past memories or thoughts, if you feel uneasy, uncomfortable, anything like that, you can always pause the video, take a break, have a breath, or move away from the phone device that you're watching on, give it a few minutes to breathe, relax, and then maybe refocus. Or if it's too much, if you want, there's no pressure, no worry. If you want to click off at whatever point when watching this, just know that with fingers crossed and YouTube guidelines, this video will remain publicly viewable forever, for as long as this video can stay up on the platform. So if you don't manage to watch it all right now, you can always catch up on it tomorrow, a week later, a month later. Even just save it to your playlist so you can always re-watch it if you need. Or if you need to process it, to really understand it, to learn in whatever way, watch so much and then replay it again in the future. You do whatever's best for you. And for the best viewing experience, so you're most comfortable, just watch and listen to what you're able to physically and mentally. This video might get deep, so I just wanted to give you that warning and heads up. So, with that being said, we need to focus on, first of all, just a little brief introduction to PTSD and CPTSD. One's post-traumatic stress disorder, the other one is complex post-traumatic stress disorder. So what's the difference between the two? So in general, a traumatic event, something that has happened previously or even in the past, doesn't matter how long it dates back to, but a singular event that could have been life-changing, life-altering. It felt like a shockwave, a tremble through the body, the mind. It can be a physical event, a psychological event, different senses with the body, the eyes, what you saw at the time, your ears, auditory, what you heard at the time, taste, what you tasted at the time during that event, touch, what you felt upon your skin or fingertips during that event. PTSD normally can be caused by a singular event, which tends to be negative and impactful, where it can leave a lasting imprint upon the body, maybe physically, if it was a scar or something that was no longer there, taken away. It's like a reminder, a visual reminder. It could be a psychological imprint, which it tends to be for the more serious situations and longer term, where it's invisible. On the surface level and towards other people around, you won't be able to see it. You won't be able to see the PTSD in that sense, but the person that's struggling will see it in some way visually, such as inside, and most likely they will feel it as well. A visual, a psychological imprint in which the past carries over to the present and possibly the future. So you might physically remove yourself from an environment or an event and move on in some way. And for other people, may move on with time, depending. But just because a person is no longer present in that environment where a traumatic event happened doesn't mean to say it just all disappears. It carries like a ball and chain, a weight, which can pull people down, weigh people down, and that can have its own wearing effects psychologically and even physically. In terms of energy, in terms of mood, it can have a chain event knock-on effect in many different ways. So, just make sure the lighting is all there. I'm just doing that just so the lighting doesn't go dark, because I know in the past when I've done my videos, if I didn't adjust the lighting, it would look really dark on screen. So I'm just going to be conscious of that through this. But yeah, PTSD can be caused by one singular event, which was negative, impactful, physically, mentally, or even both. And it leaves an impression which can last for quite some time. So with that being said, examples, typically, or an original one you might think of on the spot could be military related. If you're out at war, military training, on the battlefield, for example, if there was an explosion, a loud sound, a big blast, bright lights, so sudden and fast like that, very quick. It could be something you're on the receiving end of, like an injury. You step on a IED and it all goes. The next thing you know, you might be in pain, you might be dazed, confused, the shock, not sure what's going on. You look down at your leg or arm and it's may not be there because of the blast, the injury, the damage sustained. That can be traumatic visually, auditory. How you feel in the moment, your senses can all be under attack and have issues. Or it could be more external, what you see in front of you. You may not physically lose anything or be physically damaged in that sense, but psychologically you are scarred from seeing a friend, another soldier, pass away, and worse, like injuries and attacks. I'm being careful because of YouTube language, just so you know. Witnessing it, so basically it can come down to witnessing the loss of your own control, witnessing the loss of what you have on you, like body physically, or even externally, witnessing the loss of someone you care about or know. So general theme, death. And death itself, in other ways, not just military, just day-to-day life, can be traumatic, especially when it comes to the shock value, the shock factor. Considering Mikey Lair came across Noah Presgrove on the highway and reacted badly to it, and on the way home, from what Caden said, clearly it did play a big impact on Mikey. And with having PTSD compared to others who were present who didn't have PTSD prior, it would have taken a greater toll and just a bigger effect on what may have been going on in Mikey's mind at the time. It could be re-traumatization depending on what Mikey encountered in the past to get PTSD. It's not always death related, but the general theme of losing control or losing something can run through in many different traumatic events. And then the triggers in the future can be being reminded of that loss of control or that loss of power, that loss of sense, that loss of feeling. When it feels like things are being lost, the body and mind may panic and worry because it doesn't want to be back in a place it once was. Defense mechanisms may kick in, internal, external. Depends on the situation. But yeah, PTSD could be linked to military. It could be linked to daily life. It can be linked to more behind closed door encounters. It could be health related. It could be even when a person during pregnancy, something unfortunate happens or traumatic and it leaves a lasting impression on them. You probably could imagine and think of examples yourself, like with pregnancy, bad things happening, not quite going to plan, or something shocking, bad, unexpected happens. It might turn out okay in the end, but that one event, that one shocking moment, the factor of something being unexpected can link to a variety of different traumatic events. So when you got the shock, the unpredictability, the unexpectedness, it leaves you shaken. It can leave you unguarded and not ready for it. That's what has that greater knockback upon one's self when encountering it in the moment. It could be car-related accident. PTSD can be caused from. It can be from even doing a hobby, an activity, something that could be associated with fun. But during that one time, you witness or you experience on the receiving end of a terrible injury, a knock, a blow to the head or more, or even the passing. It can cross over and overlap. That one activity, one event, one moment can link in with an unexpected factor, which turns out to be negative and has a lasting impact on that person. It leaves a visual and sensory memory, but not a good thing. So when good moments happen in life and you can reflect back on it, and you may often, and it makes you feel happy, it makes you feel full and good. For someone with PTSD, daily, here and there, depending on the severity, may be reminded in some way or another of a memory which previously happened recent or in the past, and it brings everything back to present day. So in the present, when no longer being in that environment, no longer literally experiencing that event because of the PTSD and the symptoms, for them, it can feel like they're reliving it all over again. That can have its own side effects and issues and struggles. So in terms of dealing with it, coping with it daily, side effects from that, whether there's intervention or not, side effects from that. And then when re-traumatized or there's a relapse and it comes back in waves, in moments, in episodes, dealing with that, the side effects, and then anything else past that point. A person may have PTSD, they may have symptom overlaps with other issues or disorders, or how it could come across. So what you experience with PTSD, some symptoms could overlap with if a person may have a form of OCD or may have a form of depression, how it can link with one another, or one can make the other worse or enhance it. So with OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, that's like to do with the mind and routine and rituals and thinking it and overthinking. You've got PTSD, which involves memories, intrusive thoughts, unpredictability at time, that can disrupt the flow of predictability and routine. So when routine and predictability is unearthed and messed up by a PTSD flare-up, then that'll have its own side effects too. Through PTSD, you can get panic attacks, but through OCD and breaking that routine or cycle, not being able to fulfill it on a day-to-day basis, can lead to its own panic attacks. Because with OCD, it's like a form of gaining and maintaining control. OCD, to some extent, can come from the past. If there was a loss of control, it felt something was taken away from you. And the mind, the body tries rationalizes by trying to create a new norm, a new routine, not always, but sometimes, of a possible traumatic event had taken place in the past, or just a bad event which may have not caused PTSD, but it linked onto OCD. If it's like a feeling of not feeling one's self, losing something of oneself, feeling the need to be cleansed internally or more externally with cleaning and washing and things around, still the core factor of wanting to maintain a sense of control and keeping it that way for stability, for peace of mind. If that's ever disrupted that flow, almost indirectly re-traumatizes them, brings them back to a place what they once were, which they never thought nor wanted to be in ever again, which can have panic attacks and anxiety and worry and being agitated and not comfortable, panicking and so on. So a person may have PTSD and symptoms can overlap with other issues. Some people could have problems that coexist at the same time, PTSD and other issues, caused by different things, and some all by the same. But when dealing with more, there's a lot more at play. There's a lot more going on. So whilst focusing on Mikey Lair, to us, what I know of at least, PTSD only. So I'm going to keep it like that. Is there any possibilities of complex post-traumatic stress disorder? Does that come into play anywhere with Mikey? That's unknown of. A person may feel like they've got PTSD or they've been diagnosed and told that that's what they've got. But if there was any unresolved trauma, any untreated stuff from the past or much further back, it could tie in with complex post-traumatic stress disorder or the PTSD and how the person deals and copes with it down the line. It could evolve or become more clearer that it's actually complex post-traumatic stress disorder. But what would the difference be between those, those two types and forms in terms of the differences of symptoms and the causes and effects of it in general? Well, like how we said, PTSD is normally one traumatic event, impactful. The loss of something, the death of someone in unexpected ways. It could even be behind closed doors in a domestic situation. However, that's when it starts bordering on to complex stress disorder. CPTSD can link to more than one traumatic event. It could be multiple, it could be several traumatic events over the space of time, back to back or spread out. More than one. Complex because of the depth behind it. Prolonged exposure to trauma, in a sense that you could arguably have one traumatic event, but it's dragged out for a period of weeks or months. Being exposed to something long term, for example, in war, could be being a prisoner of war. You're imprisoned, locked, caged. You can't escape. You feel trapped. Walls are closing in. Don't know where you are. Don't know when you'll be released. That can have its own issues. If a person who may do bad things goes to prison and locked up, they can have their own side effects and issues from that because of being locked up and all that. The consequences to their actions and some deserving of it. But if people like that can develop issues, then just imagine a person that's gone to war and then captured, imprisoned, total uncertainty. And the conditions probably being much worse. Prolonged trauma to what they see, what they feel, what they experience in that environment done to them. Could be torture, could be interrogation. It could be watching other prisoners fall, collapse and struggle. The noises around, the visuals can be very intense and wearing. Being in a repetitive cycle, exposed to repetitive trauma can be wearing upon the body and more so the mind. So that's a form of CPTSD. Another form could be, just as an example, in a domestic situation with family, with friends, or even in a relationship. I don't want to say certain words because of YouTube guidelines and maybe it gets a bit intense, but when it comes to poor treatment, beyond poor treatment, psychologically and physically, by the hands of a partner, someone you're supposed to feel safe around, someone you're supposed to look up to and be happy, feel safe, feel secure, to be able to be yourself and be open and be vulnerable. If all of that is taken away or harmed, it's going to have major effects upon the individual on the receiving end, the sufferer, more so the survivor. Because behind closed doors, a person can be a completely different type of person compared to in public. In public, everything seems fine, a relationship seems perfect. But as soon as that door closes, the mask comes off and the sufferer endures whatever, physical, psychological. And if it's in the circumstance of it being prolonged and open, daily, weekly, being subjected to, verbal and physical assault. There's another word, the A word, but I don't know if YouTube's going to word it, abuse. Don't know if you heard that, but I'm trying to censor myself, but people that know will know. Being subjected to that daily and often and frequently can build that exposure and that complex post-traumatic stress disorder. It can feel like it's a continuous thing, a loop, or even a cycle, whether it happens on and off, but more than once, more than one traumatic event, or it's just one continuous linear thing as it may intensify with time. And the complexity of it can also tell back to the complexity and depth of what the bad person, the controlling one, is doing, whether that be coercive control, form of physicality, punishments, consequences, threatening behavior, and much more. things done without consent too. When exposed to any of that and more, it can have a very damaging and wearing effect on the sufferer, survivor. And when they do get out, if they do get out, move on or escape, things ease in some ways. And granted, they may no longer be in that environment anymore, or no longer physically around that said person anymore. But it's the effect and impact that it has on the survivor as they move on in life. It's that invisible weight, that invisible trigger, the invisible damage that has been done, which may become more known and felt with time. So when it comes to dealing with it, when it comes to triggers or learning about it for the first time and picking up on it and wondering why you feel a certain way and why you react badly at times, or why there are struggles down the line with levels of intimacy or connections and stability, and feeling side effects and feeling bad stuff which you may have not felt before, or starting to learn about certain patterns and what was felt then is being felt now, yet you've moved away from the environment and the person. How can you still be feeling this way? Because that invisible damage and weight that carries over like a ball and chain. It's that complex post-traumatic stress disorder from a prolonged traumatic event, encounter, experience from the past. No matter how long it happened or how far back, it's still important, as in the weight the bearer carries, which can be invisible and no one else around may be able to see. What's going on inside a sufferer, a survivor, may be completely different on the outside. If you look at Mikey Lair at the party, just for example, would you be able to detect that he's got PTSD or not? Certain illnesses, certain disorders can be invisible. Just like at times when you get forms of disabilities, physical and more visually telling. But an invisible disability, to some extent, you may not know, but the sufferer will know and probably be reminded of themselves often. So it can be different for each person, but you can also apply to how they deal with it, how they experience, how they re-experience, and what happens day to day. It's not all the same for everyone, but the importance behind it does remain important regardless. So hopefully that explains it just a little bit better, as in the causes, the origins of PTSD and CPTSD in terms of the symptoms and what one could be experiencing or feeling. I'll briefly summarize it now and we can get into a bit more depth later into this video. PTSD, reliving, flashbacks, feeling it, the sensory overload, the thoughts creeping in, maybe panic attacks, having that worry, that dread within, struggling to sleep, maybe having nightmares and flashbacks, whether that be asleep or conscious during the day. When it comes to the complex one, it can be more on a deeper level based on the nervous system beyond the brain, how the whole body feels, how the whole body reacts, how it relives experiences. And it's more of a self-internal reflection as well with complex post-traumatic stress disorder, as in how the sufferer, the survivor, feels about themselves, about the possibility of connections and relationships with other people onwards. If there's an inability physically or mentally, psychologically, like a barrier, or just not able to move on or move forwards from someone previous. If someone previous is still around, or if they're no longer here, depending on the situation, invisible barrier, feeling trapped or stuck in the past, wanting to move on but not quite sure how to. That could be a form of complex stress disorder. And linking on more, as in feeling hopeless, not worthy, not knowing what happens next, or feeling that not much good will happen. They can be signs. Even forms of guilt, feeling intense guilt or feeling intense shame for something, maybe to do with the past, maybe the past traumatic outcome or long exposed outcome to a traumatic event, feeling responsible for it when likely you're not responsible, you're not to blame, but the mind may think that due to the intense and prolonged damage that was done, and maybe externally by the hands of the other bad person that may have said key words and lines and did a form of conditioning on the survivor's mind. So it's like being rewired to think and feel differently, but not in the rational, critical thinking way, but more in a damaged, broken way, or at least being told that what happens is because of your actions yourself, which induces a form of self-blame onwards. The person isn't to blame for it or the past, but they may become conditioned into blaming themselves. That can be in the situations where it's domestic or it's friendship based or it's more intimate and close, behind closed doors, away from the general public, away from witnesses. It's a more intensive and consistent basis being exposed to it, rather than just one singular one-off event in which you don't experience it ever again, but the effects do carry over. The effects with CPTSD and events do carry over, but then have a deeper weight, as in external and internal barriers and struggles. So we can go into a little bit more depth later. Mikey Lair, before the party, supposedly had PTSD, but what was it caused by exactly? Likely one singular event, possibly. You could sit here and guess all day to try and figure out maybe Mikey had an incident, an accident, he injured himself, he had multiple traumatic knocks or blows to the head, an accident or an attack, and he relives that till this day, the attack or an ambush or a robbery. He almost like recreates it in the future by crime and robbery as of, I think, 2025 onwards. Sometimes a person that has gone through a traumatic event may try to relive it in the future to gain a sense of self-control back. It's like reliving the moment to re-establish it on your own terms, putting yourself in the same situation or switching the roles up to be on the other side, to feel and think how it feels, to see it differently, to see it out as a form of moving on. It might work, it may not, and depending what's being relived, could be dangerous for themselves or anyone else around. If a crime was committed in the past and Mikey was a victim of a crime and it caused traumatic stress, it was a traumatic event. If Mikey relived it by reenacting or roles reversed into the future, that could explain maybe the robbery, the crime, a co-joint robbery. Maybe. No guarantee. Sometimes when it comes to intimacy or if it comes down to role play, reliving the past, but in a different sense, in the present, certain actions, certain activities that were once performed back then, traumatic, or became that when associated with a bad person that was known for a traumatic event. But reliving it in the present as a gain and a way of maintaining control, taking back control, reliving or redoing a certain activity, a certain moment, environment, stimuli, but with a different person present who you trust and they trust you. It's like rewriting the past. So you're not wiping the slate completely clean. You're not neglecting the past, but it's like an alternative way of being able to move on and re-experience things. Finally get back to doing things maybe you once enjoyed or once liked, which at one point was taken, and now you're able to redo now under your own terms, without the pressures, without the consequences, just the positive factors only. And it's shared and expressed mutually to maintain now control, stability, functionality, and just all the positive effects. Rewriting history under your terms for the better, not for the worse. But for Mikey Lair, we don't know what happened in the past and if it was replicated in the present at the party or the future onwards. That's just one of the coping mechanisms. It can also be one of the forms of dealing with it if it was seen as indirect treatment. Sometimes there can be an overlap between a form of treatment and a form of coping and even a defense mechanism. These different methods can help the body, the mind, sometimes, and other times they may not. Apologies if there are any background sounds. There's a lot of trains nearby, which is ironic when I'm trying to do a very important video, but not much I can do about it. Just got to keep on going. So, Mikey may have been involved in some kind of crime and it left a traumatic imprint on him. Noah Presgrove's case, at one point considered a crime, or in the early days at first treated as a crime officially, or just by a member of the general public like Mikey who sees it firsthand, the extent of the injuries, you might think worst case scenario and associate it with a crime. That may be a trigger to reliving something what Mikey experienced in the past, why it set him off, why it made him upset, why he kept going around over and over again, reliving, talking about it verbally on repeat like a broken record in the car when Caden was driving Mikey Lair home along with Brylan and Isaac. As for what was said, I think it was like, I can't believe it, I can't believe it, I can't believe he's dead, oh my God, I can't believe it. Going over and over that again in your head and even verbally, it's like a form of denial. It could be kind of an overlap with stages of grief, but it's also more so re-traumatization, being reintroduced to something similar that happened in the past. And if Mikey is exposed to it once again, it's like Mikey putting himself in the shoes of someone much closer, or even in the shoes of Noah as to what it could have felt like. It can happen in different ways, these re-triggers. You may have once been in Noah's shoes, but you survived something, but it had a lasting impact. Now you see someone else who was once in your position, but it was fatal. You indirectly put yourself into the shoes of that person that's no longer here and relive their event, relive their moment to feel what it could have been like. Likely identifying it and relating more because you were once there, that emotional connection. But with that emotional connection, it has more of an emotional drain. Like with people that have more empathy and sense it within other people, good and bad, it can be draining upon yourself. There can be an overlap with, whilst Mikey may have PTSD, and Noah's death could be a re-trigger of what Mikey saw or was directly on the receiving end of in the past. Whilst that's going on, because Noah is no longer present, but Mikey may be reliving his past and reimagining what it could have been like for Noah, a secondary person can be onset secondary trauma. Now, normally secondary trauma can come from a caregiver, a support network system, a fellow friend, a partner, or whoever, when supporting and dealing with a primary survivor from PTSD or even CPTSD. When it comes to either trauma dumping or listening, being there, that emotional weight that is passed on, or it feels like that, to the one that doesn't have any issues, that emotional weight and baggage with time sometimes can lead to the partner, the supporter, developing secondary trauma from what they've heard, what they've seen from the primary survivor. It's not done with intent, it's not done on purpose, but it can happen, especially if the other person isn't capable or has the mental capacity to take on that mental weight and load from what the primary sufferer is going through or has done. So why sometimes intervention is needed in between, or other times a slightly wider support network or system is needed. Sharing to some extent amongst one person you're closest to, and then distributing that a little bit with other people you're close to. The person that is struggling may not be able to direct it all to everyone or orchestrate it perfect. It's not expected. But as for methods and all that, that can be shared and saved for later. But I just wanted to touch briefly upon the secondary trauma, how it can be passed on indirect in forms of basically collateral damage. That's what secondary trauma can be. You may get exceptions out there where a partner, a friend, simply has that mental capacity and unlimited stamina because they're ready, they know the importance, and so on. But linking back to Mikey, I think either Mikey's sister or some family member spoke out in defense of Mikey maybe a few weeks or a month ago. Correct me if I'm wrong, on Facebook. I don't know what it was about exactly. It might have been to do with Mikey getting in trouble, crime related, and the family member was saying, well, Mikey hasn't been arrested or this hasn't quite happened yet. There was some kind of defense. Who knows? But with defense comes a level of support. We, or at least I, don't know Mikey's background as in family life, daily life, early life, whether that links to PTSD, whether it links to just a support network. That can all play major roles when dealing with struggles and onwards. It's not for me to question or critique too much because I don't know. But predicting or estimating what could have happened and compared with how it was dealt with, it can differ from person to person. So if it was a crime Mikey was on the receiving end of in the past, can cause trauma if it's a singular event. If Mikey sustained an injury or a knock to the head, or a couple of them spread out with time, could link to a form of PTSD. Those physical sensations. Damage to the brain and mind can disorganize and cause issues. So where it normally regulates the body, the mind, the nervous system, if impacted in any way or certain areas of the brain has been knocked or damaged, it could possibly lead to a form of PTSD. Flashes, white flashes in the eyes due to trauma, a knock, a blow, a hit. One time, strike one, strike two, strike three, then a form of PTSD induced. Sometimes a person may have PTSD from the past, and it might be more psychological, it might be domestic, it could be the loss of someone unexpectedly. And in the future, they could have a separate accident which isn't traumatic, but there's a lot of trauma on the brain. If there's like a knock, you bang your head. You banged your head, which caused a deep cut, and it went to the brain or close to the bone. That jolt, that knock, that blow to the mind, the head, can cause its own issues. It could even cause re-traumatization of the moment, if there's any references, links, triggers to the past, or if the mind is shaken and knocked, it could unlock something within or create something within, but not for the best, not for the greater of good. A knock or a blow to the head could impact memory, could be the loss of memory, or it could damage part of the unconscious, subconscious mind, which has repressed untreated trauma from the past. And that knock to the head or brain could somehow push certain thoughts or untreated trauma to the forefront of everything, of one's conscious collective mind. So now they're reliving and experiencing some stuff they've never dealt with before. So it's new to them, but not in a good way. And that can be overwhelming, and it can also be hard to deal with. Why is this all happening now? Why am I feeling this? Why am I now feeling that? It's been this many years. Why is it getting worse? Why are things getting worse despite so much time in dealing, coping, and putting up with it? Surely time heals. It can to an extent, But if some stuff is pushed under the rug or neglected or forgotten or not treated, not known of, not dealt with, it can build. Just like if you had a balloon, you put it under the tap, fills with water, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. The problem gets bigger. It's not de-escalating, it's only escalating. The consequences within are growing. Trying to keep it bottled up or trying to keep it within. And once it reaches a possible breaking point, breaking limit, the balloon will burst. It may slowly start to burst or tear, then it starts spilling out in more ways than a person could imagine, which they weren't used to or expecting. For Mikey Lair, did he ever bottle things up or withhold feelings and thoughts? If it ever bubbled up, and then it only de-escalates when expressed as a form of displacement. Not all PTSD will lead to defensiveness in physical ways, as in punching, kicking, slapping, or reacting reflexes through being triggered by something in the moment, or loud sounds which cause a person to go into a bunker-like state, maybe hands on ears, closing the eyes, rocking back and forth, curling up into a fetal position from any event in the past, and in the moment really tense, or even during a night terror, and then if another person came too close and, intimate, or a slight little touch, are you okay? And then slap like that, or that, anything. Because when they're re-traumatized, when they're sensitive, when something's going on in the moment and reliving, if it does tie back to a previous person in the past or a certain moment, environment, anyone around in the present, to the sufferer, survivor, if they are touched, if they're comforted, if they hear a familiar voice or name, whilst being exposed to a re-entry of trauma, they're not going to associate that friend, that best friend, that partner to the one you are with in the moment. They may mentally paint a picture, but the person that they see in front of them, you, as a person from the past, a bad individual that caused this trauma in the first place. And when reliving it, when hearing a voice, you don't associate it with someone you love, you associate it with someone that hurt you. So the person retaliates defensively, get away, move away, I don't want you, I don't like you, or physically pushing someone, slapping someone, defending themselves. What they're acting out on, they don't mean deep within. That's not how they actually see or think of you, but in that moment they see or feel you as a completely different person, and more so someone from the past. So it's like taking it out on you, but not done with absolute intent or purpose, if that makes sense. So it can lead to a form of collateral damage. It can lead to a form of being present and trying to figure out, for the one on the receiving end, why. You're trying to apply comfort, you're trying to protect them, you're trying to hold them, you're trying to reassure them. But during an episode or during an intense freeze or reflection period, best thing you can do is give them space, give them room until they settle down, cool down. So then the next time that they see or hear your voice, they'll know who you really are and not misinterpret it as someone from the past, if that makes sense. For Mikey Lair, if Mikey was on the receiving ends of another person in the past, physically or mentally, if at the party Noah Presgrove said or did something, or a prank, and it went wrong or was misinterpreted, did it trigger Mikey Lair in any way? I'll give you one very raw example right now, okay? People may not agree with it, but it's just a very raw example. Traumatic events can also link back to sexual stuff as well. Maybe without a person's consent. Impactful. Maybe feeling like innocence has been stolen, taken. or feeling like bloody trains, or the feeling that there's been a loss of control because another person has overpowered you or the situation. So it's something more physical and intimate, regardless of what gender, and you're on the receiving end of that, a traumatic moment, impactful, lasting, visual, mental, physical, psychological imprint with time. If Mikey Lair ever went through that in the past, or even during childhood, which would be much more, impactful in a negative way, if at the party, and if Noah Presgrove was teabagging people, and from what's been said, Noah wasn't wearing any clothes, contact made with certain parts of the body, if directed towards Mikey Lair as a joke prank, if Mikey was exposed or on the receiving end of teabagging, that intimacy, that touch, that skin, that unpleasant feeling could serve as a trigger, a reminder of the past, leading to Mikey retaliating, taking it out on Noah. Noah didn't mean to cause any harm or cause any trouble. Noah likely may have not known of Mikey's PTSD, maybe because Mikey never shared it in the first place. So without that communication, without that consideration, things were broken. A form of an intimacy trigger, a form of a unpleasant feeling trigger, and then Mikey takes it out on Noah. I'm not saying that did happen. I'm just saying how PTSD can affect someone, and even in the future. And when an action is performed or words are expressed, if it serves as a trigger, a person could respond back to it very negatively. And the other individual that didn't mean to cause any harm suffers as well for the consequences. It can, link. It can be a chain reaction, and something which may have happened even way back in the past, 10, 20 years ago, could flare up, come out of nowhere 5, 10, 20 years later. There's no real set time. It's different for everyone. It's all important, but it's in terms of how it happens and the triggers and all that, it can differ from person to person and situation to situation. I'm just trying to think of the different examples as to what Mikey could have experienced. No traumatic event is just simple and basic. They're all impactful and significant, especially to the individual on the receiving end of it. It doesn't have to be directly what they go through. It could be what they see someone else go through, but it still impacts them as it's a reminder. I mean, some train drivers can get PTSD when operating trains and then on tracks. If a person, someone else, removed themselves from this world, and if they did get onto the tracks as a train was coming, whilst the person that is removing themselves is suffering themselves a lot to put themselves in that position. A train driver or a lorry driver on a highway, whoever, could be going about day to day. They may or may not have issues already, but then when exposed to this, hitting something, hitting someone, or someone colliding with them, hearing that thud, seeing it in sight, and the after effects can have a traumatic impact on the witness, on the person that was there front and center, almost like VIP access, all unfolding in the moment. Even a passerby walking in a city and then sees someone falling from a building, depending on the circumstances, would be traumatic, seeing it in front of you. Even if you referred back to the Twin Towers, how some people rather jump out of the burning building rather than just wait till whatever happens. People that had jumped out of that and it was on the news and recorded and people nearby saw them, the desperation, that can be traumatic. It's like secondary exposure, not being in the person's shoes, but seeing it all unfold in front of you and it almost being on replay, and that loss of control, not being able to control the situation in the moment for yourself, if you're on the receiving end, or not being able to control the situation on behalf of another person, and you just see it all unfold and there's nothing you can do about it. Powerlessness, that can be another trigger when it comes to re-entering a world that you tried escaping from or moved away from. So, with Mikey Lair, if there's any examples you can think of as to what may have caused his PTSD, you can always leave it down below, of course. I'm just thinking of certain examples. So, with those causes of the PTSD, the effects it can have, I've mentioned some. I'll try and mention a few more later. What about during the party? What about when Mikey was, supposed to be having fun? You're at a party. You're supposed to be having fun, enjoying the moment, letting yourself go, being loose, going with the flow, possibly being around familiar faces and good people, having a good time, listening to music. Depending on the age range and who's about and the environment, the party could be rather loud. Due to the nature and the size of a building, the complex, some people with PTSD, a symptom overlap or a possible effect with PTSD could be enclosed spaces. Some people, claustrophobia, but other people may have an overlap with a traumatic event that they experienced in the past. They relate to that due to the certain environment that they were in. So if Mikey is at a party, are there any overlaps or triggers just there, visually, any senses? Yes, you could argue and say, well, if it's that bad, what Mikey has or was going through, would he really put himself through it by going to a party? Well, that's the thing. People can avoid stuff as a means of self-protection, avoiding a route on a walk to stay safe. Because in the past, when they went on that walk, down that route, something bad happened, traumatic. They don't want to relive that. They'll avoid that pathway. They'll go down a different path. Or if it was a road traffic collision accident, they may avoid a certain motorway. They may avoid a certain route back home because they want to gain back self-control. They want to build a safe routine of predictability, stability, so they can be more at peace with themselves or anyone else about. Avoidance can be a strong reference. Psychological, physical avoidance to an environment, a place, a location, a route. Even avoidance to relationships with people and connections. With those you were friends with over time, slowly disconnecting, pushing them away, pushing yourself away, freezing yourself. I talked about that a few weeks ago with another psychological video where when dealing with the events of the party, the effects, or within the community dealing with learning about the case, you may alienate yourself or other people might, and then you get lost within it all. And the self-defense mechanism convinces or thinks that it's best to self-isolate, and avoidance, it adds a protective barrier. It helps, it eases, it brings about peace, or the suffering is isolated to oneself, so then they don't feel like they're bringing anyone else down around them. On the outside, isolation, independence can come across as dealing with it. Doesn't always mean to say being better off. A person isolating or avoiding may help them in some ways, but then cause issues elsewhere, as in then dealing with it all. The silence, but the loudness at the same time, paradoxically speaking. Not having that support, not having that ear to listen to, but knowing it's kind of self-inflicted, especially when in the presence of others, because of pushing away, moving away, to contain the situation, to box it all into one place, one environment. So it's just them. because they feel like they can only deal with it themselves. They don't know how to with other people around them. Opening up or getting close, too dangerous, too risky. Maybe with links to the past to avoid those triggers in the present and future. But as said, one action can lead to a different reaction. One effect can lead to a different impact down the line. But it's not for them to know. It's not for them to know everything or control everything, because they're just surviving, or maybe barely. So, different ways of looking at it. Apologies if it does get a bit deep. As said, you can always pause the video or take a break if you need. Take a moment or get a drink. I don't think it would be structured like this, maybe in other videos, the really professional ones, but I'm not a full-on professional. But nevertheless, it's making sense of the case, Mikey Lair's situation, trying to think of the different possibilities, just like with the theories behind Noah's cause of death, injuries sustained, events at the party, figuring out why it happened, what could have caused it, any anomalies along the way. That can apply to PTSD as well. What are the anomalies? What stands out most to cause a re-trigger of the past? If it's being handled, dealt with, or a person's been coping, getting by, or just about surviving, what's the anomaly that changes it all to cause a reaction, a bad one? What's an anomaly which causes a form of avoidance all of a sudden, a form of coldness, a form of silence? What causes it? Which you've got to look into. Whilst at the party, Mikey Lair is present. For example, not always, if you had a person in the military, in the army, they went through a traumatic event when deployed out somewhere, could be associated with a IED, an explosion, a blast, an injury, the visual reminder of it, the flashes, the ringing of the air, the loudness, where it feels like you're really enclosed in a very tight space, paradoxically compared to being in an open field, but feeling so suffocated by the smoke, the dirt, the mist, the crimson mist around. Feeling boxed in, enclosed, trapped. Defense mechanism, maybe closing the eyes, boxing the ears, closing them, grasping, holding onto the body, tensing the muscles, hypervigilance, hyperarousal, adrenaline, kicking, pumping on through, blood, heart rate, beating faster than ever in the moment, can come back as symptoms in the future when dealing with forms of PTSD. That might not apply to Mikey, but if you had a former soldier who's gone through something like that, if they were to attend a party in which they felt able, it might be their first time since what's happened. They may have not had triggers before, so they simply wouldn't know. Especially if maybe the PTSD, when it came about, the event, hadn't happened that long before. Maybe weeks, months before. It hasn't had that time to settle in, to kick in, to feel it all, to be diagnosed. Who knows? Different ways of looking at it, right? But just on a very basic scale, you have a soldier that has been exposed to loud sounds, flashes, unpredictable noises, unexpected movement, motion, visual, auditory, taste, what they may taste. All of that in one moment, one event, visually, or to them feeling psychologically scarred. Would you expect a soldier to attend a rave, a house party, an enclosed space full of other people about, noisy, rowdy, loud, expressionate, physically or verbally, really tight enclosed space, maybe with disco lights, flashing lights, a dim, dark lit room, but with TV on, radio on, some lights, lasers flashing in the eyes, people dancing, fast movement, a sensory overload leading to a form of simple, overwhelming feelings. People coming and going, shouting and screaming, singing loud, shutting, slamming doors, people coming and going from the party, a vehicle backfiring like a gunshot. Would you expect a military person who's gone through a traumatic event to be at a party like that? A party which Noah Presgrove attended where there were firearms present and drunk people too. Shooting guns maybe in the distance. Hunting animals recklessly. It would sound like a recipe for disaster and an intense flashback and forms of triggers all in one go. So many triggering factors about. Now, you could ask yourself, well, Mikey's not a part of military, so that doesn't apply to him. Some could say, well, just in general, a military person just wouldn't be dumb enough to attend a party. But it doesn't work like that. Certain forms of PTSD, and depending on the length and time it's gone on for or when it first happened, it might not happen initially. It might not be felt. It might not be noticed immediately. It might take time for it to sink in and to feel it. It might take time to discover the patterns, the predictability, the triggers, to know a pattern, to then know what to do, what not to do, what to avoid and what not. When dealing with it for the very first time, you're not aware, you're not used to it. It takes time to adapt. It takes time to learn and know what's going on. And it also comes down to whether the person gets help or there's some support along the way. If not immediate and it's dragged out, that can delay the recovery. It can delay the learning in knowing the triggers. So if you don't know in the first place, you don't know. And if you don't know, you will do things which could harm you. You could do things which aren't good for your mental health until when it's too late, or you do suffer or you do struggle, and then you may link one thing with another and then realize it's not good for you. That should be avoided. That should be micromanaged. Things like that. Got to consider Mikey Lair was about 16 or 17 at the party, a young age. With PTSD at a young age like that, with the body, the hormones, and growing, and testosterone, there's a lot going on. If there is a chemical imbalance, if there is an impulsive nature, if there is a flashback with the PTSD and a crossover, it could end badly for someone. Does that mean it ended badly for Noah? As in a link? Not quite, but it's just a suggestion, it's an idea, a possibility. One factor you've always got to consider, Caden may have associated himself with Mikey at the scene at the highway at 5:15, at 5:21, okay? But when asleep at the party, leading up to Noah walking away and then Noah's death at some point, whatever time that may be, Caden was asleep, yes, and woke up twice. Went to sleep at 2 in the morning, woken up at 2:42, went back to sleep at whatever time, woke back up from his timeline at 5:15. The norm to Caden is, when Caden first went to sleep at 2 in the morning, Mikey Lair was on the floor. When Caden woke up at 2:42, Mikey Lair was still on the floor. When Caden woke up at 5:15, Mikey Lair was on a chair or recliner. Brylan, I believe, was on the floor. So that would imply Mikey, for example, between just after 2:42 to 5:15, at some point or more than once, was on the go, moving about. But Caden wouldn't know what Mikey was up to because Caden was asleep. But it's important to acknowledge it's not just a time of 2:42 onwards to 5:15 of switching of places, meaning getting up, moving about, and doing something. You got to consider 2 in the morning to 2:42. Caden may have went to sleep seeing Mikey on the floor and woke up from his sleep seeing Mikey on the floor, but it doesn't mean to say Mikey was in one place all that time for 42 minutes. Because 11 minutes before Caden woke up at 2:42, Mikey was supposedly outside with Pepe Guam at about 2:32 in the morning of Monday. It goes to show that Mikey may have truly never gone to sleep, was just simply resting, couldn't have slept or was restless. And this is what's important to acknowledge. People like to downplay Jack Newton and say he's wrong or he's got it wrong. Well, Jack said he was woken up at 5:30. Noah's family contest and say, well, it was originally said to be 5 in the morning. But beside that, Jack had mentioned in Partisan True Crime interview that he was woken up by Jasmine Millan, I believe, about Noah missing. Jack played it off like, well, it could happen. It's no big deal, didn't worry too much. Then Jack said he saw or had a conversation with Mikey Lair, who was still awake. Still awake implies that Mikey never truly went to sleep. And based on like what Caden said about in between a certain time period, Mikey must have switched places, so he got up and did stuff. Well, it just so happens that even before that, within that 42-minute time difference of Caden going to sleep for the first time and then waking up by Alicia's call, Mikey was doing something at 2:32 outside front patio porchway underneath the traffic barrel with Pepe Guam. Why does this matter? How does this link to involvement with Noah Presgrove? Well, if Mikey's on the move back and forth, he could have been present around Noah at some point. And if not asleep, more aware and more alert to anything that does happen around and any triggers that may follow. If you're asleep and something happens, to some extent you might not be triggered, unless it was like a loud sound that startled and woke you up. But if it's something visual and you're in a deep sleep, you may not notice it pass by you. You're not triggered. But if you're constantly awake, hyper alert, hyper vigilant, you're going to sense it more. And when you've got PTSD, certain symptoms can be, tense, protective, mentally scanning the room for threats, scanning the area to see if it's safe or not. It's exhausting, it can be, mentally and physically. Always on the go, always with the switch turned on. You want to switch off. You want to shut the world out. But when dealing with PTSD, sometimes it's just not possible. Or when in environments around others, it's impossible to shut off because you're dealing with all the threats around you, all the stimuli, checking to constantly make sure that you're safe. That can impact your sleep. That can impact your internal body clock, your equilibrium, and so on. In the past, a certain routine or pattern to sleeping and it being associated with comfort, peace, relaxation, the mind and body settling down. But when after going through traumatic events or even complex traumatic events, it can have a wearing effect on the person. It can lead to sleep night disturbances. It can lead to, as I said, with PTSD, intrusive thought when the body mind relaxes the most, the overwhelming feeling flooding the nervous system and body in the presence of a night terror, a dream, but not a good one. Sometimes when you're most relaxed is when the darkness and can be triggered most because the defense mechanism has lowered, the wall has lowered. So any unresolved trauma or anything on the tip, which there's a trigger which activates it, it can lead to a sinking feeling, but it can also lead to a flooding. It can lead to it spilling out. And when asleep, that could be considered when you're physically, psychologically most vulnerable because you've let everything relaxed. If in the present, face-to-face, symptoms can be muscle tension, headaches, migraines, pain in the legs, in the knees, in the feet, in the hands, because of tensing the body throughout the day as a form of coping. The mind, the temple, the eyes strained and hurting, the chest and breathing strained as well from breathing intensely, maybe the odd panic attack, scanning the room, scanning the area, planning your route for the day or planning what you're going to do for the day, whatever it might be, hobby, activity, if it's work, it could be anything, in an environment, routine or not. So much going on in here as a roadmap for the day. So much planning, so much thinking leaves the person exhausted by the end of the day, which in itself can lead to burnout. It can lead to maybe passing out, as in sleeping, rather well at first, but indirectly it's contradictory because it leads to sleep disturbance because the body is so tired, exhausted, the defense mechanisms are so down and the wall has been lowered that anything that was held back like a dam is now flooding out, rushes through the body, leads to intrusive thoughts, leads to night terrors, fears, reliving a traumatic event as if it's in the moment, real time, like it's happening all over again, even though it's not, but to them it is. It can startle them, it can wake them up, it can impact them, and it can lead to feeling unstable, scared, panic. And it might take a few hours, maybe a few days to settle down, calm down and relax, regulate the mind, regulate the body, regulate the bloods. It can be very impactful. With Mikey Lair and having maybe, not guaranteed, but maybe issues with sleep. Sometimes it can be through going to sleep initially and then being woken up by a night terror, a dream, reliving it. Or it could be that the body is too tense, too hyper alert that you can't even close your eyes. Whether you try, you're not going into that dream state. You're just still on the go, turned on, laying there in bed, eyes closed, and you're wondering, why am I not going to sleep? Why not? Whether the muscles are tense or not, it just feels like nothing's changing, nothing's happening. You might be restless, you might not be able to relax, may not even be able to sleep in the first place. Could that explain why Mikey Lair never truly went to sleep? You might have tried resting. Resting is different to sleeping. The person that's resting with their eyes closed, you could assume that, oh, they're asleep. And to Caden, who may or may not know of Mikey's PTSD at the time, who knows? But the assumption of, well, I went to sleep at 2, I saw Mikey on the floor. I woke up 42 minutes later, Mikey's on the floor. It must mean he is still asleep. Because when I went to sleep, his eyes were closed. When I woke up, his eyes were closed. But what's important is what Mikey was doing in that space of time when Caden wasn't aware, when Caden was asleep. And there is, to an extent, footage, proof and evidence to show that Mikey was doing things, or one thing at least, at 2:32. Messing about, playing around, harmless, having fun, that's good. But in terms of one's own health, putting that first, that's partially neglected because it feels like that can't even function. Trying to sleep, not being able to, not knowing how to drift off, body, mind too tense, too worried, too focused, too restless, whether the person knows of that direct or not. What do? Try and force themselves to sleep? Continue to rest in that position? No, they likely get up, do something else to distract themselves, or just feel like, well, can't go to sleep, so obviously I must not need it, and then they do something else. That neglect of sleep, that neglect of the internal body clock can lead to burnout down the line and further issues. A person with PTSD may neglect certain needs within the body, the mind, physically, mentally, because the person isn't aware of the severity at that time, or isn't aware of the coping mechanisms or what to do about it. Yeah, as for treatment, that could be available, but in the moment or at a point, it just might not be possible to think that, to consider it. Might be down to lack of resources, lack of access, lack of time, who knows? But when I referred back to the sleep, could explain why Mikey wasn't able to sleep, why he may have remained awake and just rested only, and Jack, from when he went to sleep to when he woke up, Mikey was still awake. Whoa, how do you manage that? Maybe because of sleep disturbances, night terrors, or any troubles like that, which keeps the person hypervigilant, hyperactive, unable to sleep. Like I just say, sleep with one eye open. That could be a literal case for Mikey or some people with PTSD. To some extent, some people who may have experienced home intrusion, burglary, robbery, which resulted in a traumatic event in itself or more. Some people may go to bed, lock all the doors, bolt the doors beyond. OCD could kick on in, check the bolts, double check, symptom overlap, additional issues developing from that one event. Going to sleep with a baseball bat beside the cabinet table, something you may have not done in the past, but now you have to. in order to feel safe and protected. You shouldn't have to be put in that place, but sometimes adaptation happens and it might feel like you've got no choice. Patterns can change, actions can change, but it can have an overall negative impact on the survivor-sufferer. And it can differ from person to person. We don't know how Mikey does with sleeping in general, but just from that one night, because Mikey only went to the party on the Sunday and stayed there Monday morning, meaning only one night, one sleep, and wasn't even able to do that. So did Mikey at any point have issues with sleeping days before, days prior? I mean, you got to look at it this way. When referring back to, would a person like Mikey, or would a person in general with PTSD consider going to a house party where it's enclosed, the space, it's noisy, could be a bit loud, certain lights, motion, alcohol, the effects that could have? Because alcohol itself can be problematic, because some people with PTSD or CPTSD, as a coping mechanism but an unhealthy one, may resort to substance usage or alcohol consumption to drown the demons, to drown the noise, to feel a little bit more human or alive, or to feel like everyone else, because they've been subjected to weeks, months of not feeling like themselves, losing themselves, or feeling isolated from everyone else, physically or mentally or both, because they're dealing with an invisible internal war which no one else can see, which no one else can feel. And if there's no one else around that is going through the same thing, it can lead to retreating within one's own body, one's own shell. And sometimes there might be that intense urge to try and break from it by doing a certain action which may be considered unhealthy and not ideal. But in the short term, it's used to try and escape from it all. So by taking substance or alcohol, it numbs the issue, or it's like a distraction. But prolonged usage, exposure to stuff like that, what good does it do? It can have its own side effects and issues. Wear and tear on the body, on the mind, addiction, and so on. Some people may use it as a coping mechanism, but it may not be considered a healthy one. But you can't blame the person in the moment for trying to do something. That's why sometimes there needs to be guidance or intervention along the way to steer someone on the right path, or as best as one can, even if it's just pointers and suggestions, because certain forms of treatment and support in itself could re-trigger trauma from the past based on familiar words and language used, which reminds them of something that was done in the past by the hands of a bad person. So each event, each situation is very different, and how it's handled needs to be handled within reason. So you got Mikey Lair at the party, 16, 17 years of age, mentally, physically, psychologically not fully developed as a fully grown male, still learning, still growing. So susceptible to the environment and the stimuli around, which could be life-changing for someone. That's why they say during childhood, when bad things happen, it can have major impacts in the future. So like when it comes to phobias, some of that can link back to childhood trauma or a childhood problem. If, for example, if you were fully developed, you had perspective, you had critical thinking, and you were somewhat stable, functioning, and somewhat healthy, physically or more so psychologically, if you got bit by a dog and you're a fully grown adult, it might hurt. And provided it's not life-threatening, it'll just hurt, and it might shock you a little bit. Not say that it's not going to cause any phobias, it could still cause phobias, of course. Or if it happens more than once, it could wear the person down. But When you're more developed, you formed a level of critical thinking and stability. When something bad happens, you might be able to reflect on it and calm yourself, make sense of the situation and process it better or the best you can. Might not always work, but more likely to. If you're a child and you got bit by a dog, that's a first lasting impression you will have. Especially if you're a fully grown adult, if you've already been exposed to stuff in the past, as in just exposure to animals and it was okay. This one time it happens, you're fully grown, critical thinking, you might be able to process it, deal with it a little bit better. If you're a child, impressionable, first impressions, first encounter, and it's a negative, it's bad, makes you cry, it hurts, you're going to associate that very first event with every other event in the future. Kind of like how indirectly some people say, oh, that gender of people are all the same. Reality is, they're not. But to that person who's been exposed to something negative by the hands of a certain set of group of people, and that's all they know, that's all they're going to expect for the future. Not their fault, it's just they've been around the wrong people. But psychologically, it's going to have a more lasting digital, physical, mental imprint on someone younger if they've been exposed to something negative, then have a phobia and an association with a fear, a cause, an effect. So, not too sure if I had a phobia, not quite, but being nervous, a bit scared around certain animals and dogs. Ignorant, which is a lot of people out there, ignorant people will say, oh, he's harmless, oh, he's only playing, he's only being nice, he's not aggressive, he's a big softie. Be considerate. Not everybody has had positive experiences. For example, me. I was hospitalised by a dog in the past. It was accidental, but it still happened. That is why I've got a scar on my head, right there. Okay? No, it's not Harry Potter. Nope. But because of a dog. And in other circumstances, other things happened. So my first initial impressions weren't positive, were negative. So undoubtedly, down the line, you associate one event or two with every other in the future. It's a defense mechanism to protect yourself. You see, you sense something, you detect danger, you feel it, you pick up on it, you remove yourself from the situation, you avoid that path, you avoid that location, you avoid that route, you avoid that person, you avoid that animal, whatever it is. So whether it's a direct phobia or bordering onto it, you may avoid. Okay? A form of flooding can be a treatment, being exposed to that perceived threat and fear, panicking until you exhaust yourself in the moment and you have no more left in your lungs, and then you just adapt and put up with it. Sometimes can work and other times it's damaging. Systematic desensitization, which is a form of a hierarchical structure, being exposed to low stressful stresses and factors and slowly building yourself up to the main thing that causes all the issues or once did in the past. Easing it slowly to adapt bit by bit without being traumatized or damaged along the way. So, other symptoms, other issues can happen and treatments too. But the younger you are and exposed, for example, to something traumatic, can be a lot harder to deal with down the line than if you were, for example, more grown up, fully grown adult going through a traumatic event. And why is that? Because in one way, when you're a child and you're still learning, you may not know what's right, what's wrong, you're still learning. Something bad happens, you're exposed to something bad back then, you may not think much of it. You may think, oh, it's just normal. It's normal to do this like something else. It becomes your norm, which in reality, it shouldn't be and it's not right. But that's all you know. And if that's all you know, you'll associate it in the future as a normal thing when it's very abnormal and other people don't do it or haven't experienced it. Creates like blurred lines and a form of disassociation from actual reality, rules and guidelines in life. Not that the blame is on you that's gone through it, but the people around that should have done better or shouldn't have done what they did. And it's created an abnormal norm to the sufferer, survivor, who may not be able to differentiate from what's right and what's wrong. In other ways, and it can lead to more vulnerability in the future. The other reason as to why more so the PTSD at a younger age, a traumatic event, whether the person felt or knew about it at the time, they may have discovered it later on in life, or as they grew up, they discovered or re-remembered. But sometimes when it happens at a younger age, there can be a delayed effect, because what may be felt as normal or not much of a deal back then, because it's still developing, when learning and developing and getting more emotions and the body growing, you might then reflect back on something, and then it kicks, reality sinks in, and it's like, oh no, what has gone on? What did I go through? And then you pick up on it, relive it, rethink it, analyze it, break it down, and go over it. And then all that trauma, which has been delayed whilst the person has been growing with age, physically, psychologically, the coin has dropped now. They realize what they've gone through, what they were subjected to, what they were on the receiving ends of, and it has impacted them, and even more intensely because of only just realizing after a long delay. And also indirectly, subconsciously, that delay may have led to a pressure building within, bubbling under, and then it spilled out in one big go, instead of dealing with it gradually, because the person didn't know how to deal with it at the time, or didn't know about it at the time, especially with being of a younger age. So all events and moments and experiences are important individually, but some can be a bit more damaging and more complex. That's why there's a bit of an overlap with complex PTSD, as in one or two traumatic events could happen as a one-off, but it's that impactful. More so specifically because it happened at a younger age, childhood, it can cross over with the complex PTSD because of the complexity of what happened, dealing with it, not knowing the consequences or the effect on the sufferer survivor, and then it flooding down the line, and then realizing, coping, working it out, suffering, struggling, and trying to find a way through. It adds a complex barrier, as in tracing it back to when it happened, especially if there's a long period and delay. Some traumatic events can happen in which the person does struggle and suffer, maybe not immediately, but then down the line they do start feeling the side effects and symptoms, and they can't quite figure out where it traces back to, because they weren't aware or made alert of one thing associating with the other, as in causes and effects. So they may have to go to therapy or reach out to someone and then talk about it, break it all down bit by bit, and slowly work back as a form of reverse engineering the problem and issue, and finding what caused it in the first place, which could be the origins of it all, childhood. Something bad happened during childhood. It could be physical, it could be psychological, it could be a form of trust, bonds being broken, blurred lines, innocence being taken. You can imagine what that could involve, right? Without me actually saying it. The additional complexity behind why it could be CPTSD is when caregivers, support networks, friends, family members, and so on, parents, if they're responsible for the trauma, it's that trust broken, that bond broken, that vulnerability shared with them broken, making everything so much more difficult in the future when it comes to interacting or forming a bond or relationship with a new person, a complete stranger. Associating if primary caregivers, primary support networks can do something like that to someone, then what hope is there with a complete stranger in which you're dealing with uncertainty, which can be a trigger itself? It's what I would call the ladder effect. If you're hurt or screwed over by people lower down on the ladder, as in bad people, it's obvious, it's noticeable, you know who they are, they may have a criminal record, they may even admit that they're a bad person and so on, and they do bad stuff to other people, criminal and all that, a serial cheater, whatever. It's not good, it's not a good experience, it can still cause pain and suffering, but it's like, would you expect anything less or more from them when that's who they are? If you're deceived, hurt, trust broken, exploited by someone who appears so good, so trustworthy, high up on the ladder as a good person, trust related, bond, strong emotional connection at first, and then the cracks form and you're hurt by a good person. It makes it so much harder to look beyond that. Because if you're hurt by the best people out there, then what chance is there for everyone below? It could create unrealistic expectations, as in trying to find someone who's even better or more perfect. It can get difficult, but not everyone's the same. One nice person secretly could be a right pain, could be a right nightmare. Another nice person or good person, maybe night and day difference. But on a surface level, you might think same exact situation, same exact outcome, same consequences, avoidance, don't bother. And you could say that is a great shame that a person themselves may have a lot to give, a lot to share, a lot within, and they value stuff to some extent. They can no longer, because they've had to adapt. They felt they had no choice. They used a form of avoidant attachment behaviour to remove all stimuli which could pose as a threat towards them, impacting relationships, friendships and connections. And more complex and more deeper and more complex when it happens during childhood. For Mikey Lair, his PTSD, did it happen during childhood? Did it happen during his teenager years? Did it happen weeks, months before the party he attended with Noah Presgrove? If it's more fresh, it might not be treated the same way. Whether that be medication, whether that be other treatment, dealing with it, learning about it. If it's not dealt with, and there's not much time or experience in coping with it, and if any medication was taken, dealing with that and the side effects to wear out or whilst they kick in, the more fresh it is closer to the party, the more uncertainty, the more unknown, as in what is Mikey Lair capable of. Not that it's done with intent, but a person with PTSD, without fully knowing their symptoms and issues and unresolved stuff, they may not know themselves what they're capable of, which can be a scary place to be in, physically, psychologically. When they go to sleep and they have a night terror or wake up during that sleep terrified, they may disassociate, they may be a different person to who they really are. When they have an episode, a low, or they disassociate, they freeze, isolate. For them, months, weeks, days of isolation could only seem like a few minutes, a few hours apart, but to someone on the outside looking in, could feel like a literal eternity, because it might well be. That barrier, that disconnect, that self-defense mechanism, the person struggling, trying to find a way through, or the mind itself taking over as a way of coping, can lead to a change in behaviour, a change in mood. They may be aware or may not a feeling of losing themselves, their identity in the moment. It doesn't define who they really are, because what they really are is still within deep down. That's not being lost, but it may have been locked away. And during moments and episodes and flashbacks and triggers, they may change in the moment, either as a form of coping, a form of surviving. We talk about fight and flight. Fight-flight mechanisms, self-defense, could apply at the party which Noah attended for Noah himself and even for Mikey. You perceive a threat, you're scared, you're worried, you may defend yourself by running away. It's not a weakness, it's a tactical retreat, physically and emotionally. Remove yourself from a problem, remove yourself from an environment where you feel triggered or there could be damage, there could be problems, it could escalate. You remove yourself, you're saving yourself from being hurt or from something escalating. Fight is another means of protection. Stand your ground, defend yourself, verbally or physically. But not everyone may be able to do that or have the energy, or they may not have the confidence. And fight or flight, either way, it can happen. It's understandable. It's normal. Even people that may have a game plan, everything can change when in the moment. You might talk loud and have a game plan, that when stuff goes down unexpectedly, you sense danger, something scares you, makes you worry, you might unexpectedly run away because that unexpectedness takes over the mind, the body. And with someone with PTSD, for example, it can be hyper intensified compared to a person that doesn't have PTSD and is just simply scared in the moment and just legs it. It is like a ghost or a loud bang out of nowhere. The person runs away. Like human primal instinctive evolutionary behavior, running away from a danger, a threat. Defense mechanism, flight, retreat to a safer location to reflect. Sometimes people may stand their ground and fight because it's their first instinctive primal nature within some, to protect themselves, to protect others around them. Different situations for different people, different reactions for different people. It's not always the same reaction by someone in different events. It can differ. But you might get intense moments which can be dangerous, where a person with PTSD may not do fight and flight as simple as that. They may freeze instead. Whether that's directly isolating or freezing physically in the moment, not knowing what to do. They're not running, but they're not standing their ground. They're frozen up mentally, physically. They may struggle to get their words out. They may lose their voice. They may have trouble breathing. Their muscles may be very tense, unable to actually move and articulate themselves. They're like a standing statue, but imprisoned inside, feeling everything and all the noise too, but they don't know how to express it outwards. It can lead to a form of vulnerability in the moment if others are around and don't treat it with respect. That's the type of freeze response where it can be dangerous for the person who's struggling. Other freeze responses can happen later onwards. The initial flight, running away, removing yourself from somewhere or someplace. And then later, that isolation, catching up, that consideration of what was done in the moment was for the right thing, but now it's what you deal with, the cost of it, by removing yourself, by avoiding someone or people, having to face the music, to return back to those same people. How are they going to react? What are they going to say? Is it going to be 100 questions? Are you going to be put on the spot, interrogated? That'll only lead to more stress. Maybe it's best to leave it and not bother. To see the pain and hurt in people's faces if they felt abandoned by one's isolation. Stressed out because of the unknown and uncertainty. To avoid any further stress or triggers upon oneself, maybe it's best not to return back, because to oneself, who may feel a level of guilt kicking in for them retreating, they don't want to see the supposed possible damage or pain they may have caused on other people indirectly. Ultimately, if there's communication at some point and understanding, it won't get to that extremity. And if it did, there are still ways around it. It's not over. A person can isolate, a person can freeze, a person can retreat, a person can disassociate and disconnect, and a person can go into a certain focused routine, but not for the best, just as a means of simply surviving, and that's it. Doesn't mean to say it's over. It doesn't mean to say that friendship is over. It doesn't mean to say that relationship that was built and the foundations through it at first, that doesn't have to be over. There are ways around it, but it depends on if the survivor sufferer is willing to consider, and for the other person, willing to listen. It does require communication. If you've got Mikey Lair, is he able to articulate and communicate in regard to his needs, his triggers, his experience at the party, or is that neglected? If Mikey hasn't dealt with the PTSD correctly, or it's still early days, they may not know that the impact of it or the severity, or they may not know the strategies or the coping or the triggers. So yeah, they've got an issue, they have a problem, they developed it from something previous, but they think, well, going to a party isn't going to cause it to happen. Nothing's going to come from it. What bad can come from it, right? That's the mindset. One of those things where it might also link to age as well. possibly thinking invincible or be left unharmed just because of feeling able in that moment, but things can change quick. It's like if you compare a younger person to a much older person. When it comes to drinking, one person may drink responsibly, the other one may not, and the one who may not could be younger because they feel that they can handle it. If it's their first time or they're still new to it, they feel that they're capable, they're able, they might have the confidence and self-belief, but it won't always translate well afterwards, and it might end up going wrong. They may get drunk, they may become vulnerable, they may become ill, they may get alcohol poisoning depending on how they push themselves. And then they may eventually learn from that lesson eventually. A person that may have already been there, gone through that later on, and they're older, could see the alcohol and think, yeah, drink so much, enjoy it, but don't bother pushing it too far. That can be the same to an extent when comparing a person who's dealing with PTSD early on and then comparing to someone that has been a long-time survivor to a traumatic event. A person that has lived long enough and maybe suffered, unfortunately, long enough will know more about it, the causes, the effects, the triggers for themselves exclusively. So they've built a plan, a roadmap down the line, and maybe with intervention and therapy, a strategy to cope when things go wrong, when things flare up, and dealing with the unpredictability and unknown. More refined strategies which don't involve having to isolate or cut ties with people. Strategies that involve maintaining a level of peace and safety, but not having to push anyone away and still being able to have that network and closeness and even intimacy with others without much re-triggers. And if there ever was, it can be dealt with and handled in the moment with effective communication amongst close people and so on. If someone's dealing with it firsthand, first time, or still in the early days, they may not know everything, and they will learn with time in some way, either learning from mistakes, learning from triggers, learning from environments, learning from sensory feelings and sensory overload. If Mikey wasn't experienced and with being the age he was, going to a party could be a normal thing to do despite having PTSD, not really knowing the full depth and the consequences behind it. With Mikey only being there Sunday afternoon or more so Sunday evening going into Monday, not as much time spent at the party, but maybe enough time to feel certain stuff. There were people at that party that may have not done anything wrong, no arguments, no fights, who were there from Saturday till Monday. Mikey came down for one day and just a bit, and there was already fights, physicality, and wrestling. Doesn't mean to say it's done with intent, doesn't mean to say directly the PTSD caused it, but when you compare someone that has been there for multiple days or a few days without much problems or issues, and then one person comes on down for a few hours or just under half a day, and as chaos, stands out, doesn't it? Speaks volume in a way. Mikey's activities and involvement at the party may not always correlate to his PTSD, but it could play a role to some extent in some way. You never know. There's always that possibility. As it comes down to what the PTSD was, what caused it back then, and if it could be re-triggered at the party. But as I told you in the early days, when it came to, for example, Isaac Rojas, the patio area on the front at 1:05 in the morning of Monday, Brylan Sweat slapping Noah, Caden recording it as we saw, and Isaac holding the 12-gauge shotgun in the background with Avery talking to him. And some people suggested that Isaac wanted to shoot the gun off in the distance, and Avery was like, no, we can't because we don't know where everyone is, safety reasons. Maybe, but didn't stop him night before Sunday evening when driving about shooting at animals. What you got to take in mind. So, with that being in mind, you got the presence of firearms. What are firearms associated with? Danger when in the wrong hands, or danger when in the hands of someone that may be drunk or not able or capable in the moment to use it effectively. Firearms are dangerous, but the people behind them can be more dangerous if it's the wrong person, right? I get that. If you've got it all under control, you're very stable and functional, you've got the safety thing on, clip, magazine, loose bullets out, all safe. If you're careless, reckless, bad things can happen to yourself, to people around, collateral damage. But it's not just that. Associating with PTSD to some extent, depending on, the past and the causes and the effects. Just like with military, loud bang, door slamming, car backfiring can bring back those intrusive thoughts. It's a memory, a certain sense, which brings you back to that moment where you once were in the past. An ingrained word, a line, can be a trigger. A nickname can be a trigger. A sound. Things like that. Senses. What you sensed at the time. A perceived threat, a danger, a traumatic, impactful event which may have associated or attacked one of those senses, if not more, which you associate and relate to. If a similar sense is picked up on in the future, in the present, brings you back to a previous time of similarity and familiarity. For example, a bad friendship, a toxic relationship from the past. Bad person gives you a nickname. At first may sound sweet, may sound nice, but then that nickname is tainted and damaged and rendered not nice because of who it was said by and what they subjected that person to. Compare that to the future or the present, where a nice, good person is about. And unknowingly, they use the same nickname to that survivor. That survivor may retaliate defensively, verbally, and have a go. There might be backlash verbally. Or that person may freeze, panic, run away. The other individual's like, what did I say? What did I do wrong? Unknown to that guy or that other person who used that nickname, they don't know the weight that nickname has and carries. They don't know the history that nickname has from the past, what that nickname is associated with, the title it holds, and the treatment that occurred beneath it. So, when there's communication, it would be something along the lines of, well, a person from the past called me that, and I associated it with bad treatment and trauma because it was by that person that gave that name and did the same stuff, bad things. So for that name to be said once again, whilst it's said by a different person with a different context, it still holds a strong, sensitive memory and causes possible flashbacks. A sensory input leads to a re-trigger of the past, reliving it, and going through all those side effects and symptoms in the moment, maybe intensified depending on the circumstance and what's going on in the moment. So that's just one example. If you got Mikey Lair, if by any chance sounds were triggering, being at a party wouldn't be ideal for him. If it's specific sounds or certain objects which mimic or relate to what happened back then, and Mikey was on the receiving end of, a firearm may not be good to him, could be a danger. The visual object itself, the locking, the loading mechanism, the internal mechanisms, something that reminds you of something similar or the same exact thing back then. Even being held at gunpoint at some point in life, if ever, could be traumatic. Next time you see someone waving a gun about, or it looks like it's being waved towards you recklessly, even if it's a toy one, let's say a Nerf gun, it could be triggering because it reminds you, it puts you back into that place where you once were, which you never thought you would ever be in once again, but here you are. What we do need to acknowledge then, whether it's by choice or preference or other reasons, when it came to Sunday evening, when the party heated up more and more reckless actions were done, when Noah Presgrove, Jack Newton, Caden Pressey, despite Caden not being mobile because of his surgery on his knee, the knee brace, his ACL and all that, he still went along with him with Brylan and Isaac, all those guys, with the exception of Mikey. That could be telling, who knows? You know, an individual like Caden Pressey, who wasn't as mobile as Mikey was, maybe Mikey and Caden, lack of mobility. Mikey, more mobility. Both may not have firearms or access to them or own them at the time. But the less mobile one decided to tag along for the hunting of animals rather than the more mobile one. Could be preference. I'm just thinking, was there a form of avoidance in any way? We talked about the sleep patterns, sleep disturbances, unable to sleep, maybe by Mikey resting on the floor. That's pretty much it, getting up, going, moving about, doing other stuff because of the inability to sleep due to the side effects of PTSD. Could a form of avoidance stem to when Mikey was in the presence of Noah, Caden, Jack, Brylan, and Isaac when they wanted to go out shooting animals? Did they say to Mikey, hey, do you want to come along with us, tag along and shoot some stuff? Or do you want to just join in for the ride? Did Mikey say, oh no, I'm good, no, it's fine, without explaining it? Did he get pushed where he had to explain himself and that's how they found out? Who knows? Not guaranteed. But, you got a group of guys all going out, having fun. Did Mikey not tag along because Mikey isn't friends with these people or not as well established? Did Mikey not tag along because of other personal preferences? Did Mikey not tag along because it associated with firearms, the discharge of them, and Mikey felt that it would be too triggering, the sound of it, seeing it, even seeing animals hunted or harmed or dying slowly, it would impact Mikey's health, and he didn't want that. He didn't want to go through that, so he did a form of avoidance by getting out of it or distancing himself from those people during that event. Who knows? But like I said, sounds of a gun, the presence of a gun can be triggering. If Mikey had gone through something similar in the past, something that can compare, when at a party, when around people with firearms and alcohol, it could cause a relapse in thoughts and feelings. So if you can control the situation, you take control and avoid or work around it. And maybe that's what Mikey did, or maybe it was for other reasons, but it's worth taking into consideration nevertheless. If Mikey was functional and able to cope and manage, does that mean the person is perfectly fine then? People can still slip up. People can still neglect. People can still struggle at different times. Sometimes all the time, but visually and outwardly it doesn't show, but internally it is. Some people will wear a mask. They will mask themselves in certain settings, certain environments, around certain people, to pretend that everything is okay and fine when deep down everything is crumbling, collapsing, they're suffocating, struggling to breathe metaphorically, and feeling hopeless. That could be bordering on to complex PTSD then. Intense guilt, intense shame, intense feelings deep down, which can't be shared or shown. Other reasons could be fear of rejection, fear of being judged and seen as too broken, fear of opening up again and it backfiring and almost mirroring the past. And sometimes people masking themselves to avoid all the questions because they just don't want an interrogation. They want to be treated normal. They want to be normal or feel close to that, even if it means faking it. Fake it till you make it. But for someone with PTSD, under the terms of faking it, you might never make it because it's not truly dealt with. It's just pushed under the rug. And when masking it and hiding the symptoms and hiding the struggles out of personal protection, so they don't get harmed by anyone, they don't open up to anyone, no trust issues broken again, no bonds broken without getting too close to anyone, or personal care, as in not wanting to harm or pull anyone down with their own darkness, so it's easier for them to deal with it and to isolate, feel alone inside, deal with it alone inside, but be around lots of people and outwardly chat and talk, can be confusing to someone on the opposite end observing it, because it's like, well, that person's fine, that person's functional, that person's getting on. How's that possible? What is it? Is there anything really going on? Is there anything really happening? And possibly, under certain circumstances, with a person with PTSD or CPTSD, the more likely they look like they're managing and functioning, the more likely that inside they're actually drowning and sinking beyond badly. They just don't show it. And they may appear more normal, more engaging when they're struggling most, to try and counterbalance the weight, so it doesn't completely shift one way, to avoid breaking down, to avoid spilling out. So when they try harder, when they push harder, when they appear more normal, or when they appear much better, it's the complete opposite within. And with that extra energy exerted to put into that work of appearing normal and fine, and trying to get on or stay busy and stay on, maybe even overworking oneself at the cost of one's own energy, internal reserves, and internal feelings and needs, at the cost of cutting ties or isolating from familiar faces and loved ones by putting other priorities first to try and protect themselves and cope, can lead to a breakdown in communication. Ultimately, it's all feelings under the rug, pushed under. They build and build and build, and then it gets too much. So inevitably, things collapse. But they felt that if they kept on going, it wouldn't collapse. If they felt it was the only way and there was no other method around it, that they'd have a better grip on things. But they told themselves that, yes, if they don't be vulnerable like how they were told in the past, then everything will be okay, and then they won't be weak. But ultimately, it leads to feeling weak down the line when things break or flood. See, this can be mentioned a bit later, but I'll just say it now in case I forget. One person's observations as merely an opinion, regardless of how intelligent they are, if they tell someone that being vulnerable is a weakness, that is simply an opinion. To be vulnerable, and depending on the circumstance, it involves obviously lowering your guard physically, mentally, and being more open with someone or some people, which technically requires a level of comfort, safety, or confidence to be able to even explore and share. First, dealing with possible embarrassment, or dealing with nerves, or dealing with how people will react and treat you once you've said what you said. That can require a level of strength. So paradoxically speaking, and contradicting for the right reasons what the bad person originally said, by trying to instill it within someone that vulnerability equals weakness, weakness equals a bad thing, what the calculation really is vulnerability equals being open. Being open requires a great level of strength. Being in a situation post-trauma equals a greater weight to carry. Being in a post-traumatic situation and condition to where you can't be vulnerable and closed up, if ever a time of you consider or make the attempt, even just the attempt to try and be vulnerable, is an extreme strength which outweighs all the self-talk or the external false talk of weaknesses. You know, to a bad person, they could see vulnerability as weakness, because then they can take advantage of someone that is just simply calm, relaxed, and actually wanting to relax and trust someone. Trusting someone requires an extreme level of strength to be able to lower your guard, just like if, like in the past in history, you sheath your sword, you put it down, you disarm yourself when in the presence of someone else or an opposing person because you sense or feel a level of trust or you want that. So you put your tools down, your equipment, and you're completely bare. You got no defense mechanism. It requires a great level of strength to even get to that point or even just to consider it. Because once you let the guard down, metaphorically or literally, sometimes there's no going back. Or in that moment, if anything happens, anything could happen, good or bad, you subjected yourself to the unknown, and it depends on how the other person reacts. You can't control that. You can't control the external factors. They have to act accordingly, or at least that's what you would hope for. So, disarming oneself, lowering walls, lowering a shield requires a lot of strength in the first place, especially when dealing with the unknown. If it was certain and guaranteed that if you opened up or if you relaxed your muscles, if you rested on someone's shoulder and you knew that you weren't going to get hurt physically or psychologically, then it would be a lot easier. But when you're dealing with the unknown, whether you have PTSD or not, your natural defense mechanisms and the evolutionary behavior within will kick in. You will be cautious. People can be cautious and hypervigilant. But of course, it'll be more intensified if a person already has PTSD or complex trauma. If they've been subjected to the opposite in the past, as in they can't do this, they can't do that, when they've got the opportunity to do so now, they may be cautious, they may be very anxious and very reluctant because they associate it with danger, they associate it with pain. They come across a good person who has the right intentions, welcomes up and allows something to take place. They may still think, there's a trap, there's a cost. And that's the thing. Like how we said, when it comes to sleeping, that's when the PTSD and symptoms can override the body and take over. When you finally relax, when you finally get to that place of vulnerability, things take over, which isn't fair, but it happens at times. It can be the same way, ironically, for a friendship or a relationship. The closer you get to someone having dealt with previous problems in the past and trauma which could be associated with the theme of a relationship, high stakes, maybe high rewards, but high risk. The longer a person has spent with someone in the past, more connected, more time, more milestones reached. When going through trauma and that all being then lost or ripped away, dealing with it, picking up the pieces, learning everything again, gaining back a voice, gaining back a level of self-control and maybe a form of self-respect, trying to build some foundations and barely surviving when exposed to the new chapter, a new exposure to a new connection with someone. It's hard to rebuild because of knowing at the past, the ball, the chain, the weight that it carries, the trauma from the past, dealing with it in the present, and the potential triggers along the way can get all too much and overwhelming. But more importantly, when, depending on the pace, getting closer to someone in a new relationship, it can lead to that point where, because you got so far with someone previous and that didn't work out, it's like that ladder effect again. What's going to be so different about this time round? If you could get so close to someone back then, you could spend months, years getting to know them and everything seems fine. You could get married to them and then it shows, or then it gets worse and then it all breaks down. It took that long until they suffered. It took that long until you saw a person's dark side. It's like that potential, that what if, that do I want to go through that all over again? Not that it's guaranteed, but to the person struggling and being hypervigilant, they may see it as a guarantee or a certainty that the past can repeat, history can repeat. Even if it's not the case, even if the chances aren't that high, they may feel it is. And they may say to themselves as an internal voice, do I want to have to get to know someone, spend months getting to know someone, only to be let down years later? Do I want to spend that time and those years getting closer to someone physically and psychologically to a point of building a form of safety, security and happiness, only for it to be set on a false basis of security, only for it to then be ripped away afterwards and be back in the place where you once were previous with a past person? Is it worth going through all of that? Is it worth going through each milestone and getting to the final milestone before everything went downhill with the past connection and relationship? Is it really worth going through all of that just to then be re-traumatized and worse more than ever and face losing yet another person in some way, like in the past? In terms of weighing it up, it could feel like that, but that's why it's important for oneself or the presence of others in a balanced way, in a non-biased way, to balance it out and provide that perspective. Not all people will be the same. Not all people will be the complete same as to that one toxic person in the past, but to the sufferer, survivor, instincts, gut feeling, protective barriers, it's understandable why they would be cautious. What needs to be done, and I can mention it later, is breaking the cycle. Maybe not so much the survivor sufferer immediately, but the other person breaks a cycle somehow or reacts differently to the past. When you act or react differently to a past person, that sufferer survivor can't compare the two things, can they? It leads to learning something new, feeling something new, or even doing something new which can't compare to the past. Like, it could be a form of intimacy, it could be a form of exploring, going somewhere, going out to a place. Survivor with new person, doing something that has never been done, felt, experienced, sensory before by the survivor. They can't compare to the past. They can't balance it out and think, right, it's going to go wrong. Well, it happened back then, we went here, we went there, and then it turned nasty afterwards. Then they got nasty, then we argued, then bad things happen. If this event is being done for the very first time with a different person, it's like a clean slate in the moment. A new memory, a new experience can't be tainted by the past, can't be overwritten or overshadowed by the past. It's brand new. The sufferer, survivor, may not know quite how to deal with it, but when it's new, when it's a clean slate, in the moment at least, it may feel like breathing space. And if a new slate and a new experience, which can't be compared with the darkness, turns out to be light and positive, it sets a new tone, it sets a new pace, it sets a new direction. And if that can happen more than once, building a new timeline, a completely different timeline in which history can't repeat itself or damage it, a timeline that can't be altered or manipulated, such as with this case of Noah Presgrove, a timeline which can be done on a different pace and on people's own personal terms. That's the counter to trying to break through the avoidance, trying to break through the past cycles and patterns. It's not all down to unpredictable behavior, which can be a trigger. It's down to different actions and reactions compared to what they would be expecting within reason. If they mess up or they feel that they're to blame, they make a mistake, they do something wrong, they may over-apologize because of the past. They may worry, they may panic, they may think, you're going to punish me, are the consequences? I'm sorry, backing away. The other person reacts accordingly and not from what the survivor expected, something different and in the right direction. It leads to a different feeling. Oh, I've never felt this before. I'm not used to this. It changes the landscape. Of course, sometimes it, depending on the severity, it could be a bit counterproductive at some point in which, let me just adjust that, in which a survivor may be in the presence of a new person and everything feels so good and perfect, too good to be true, to the point where they may feel really relaxed or comfortable, but at the cost, untreated, untamed, not dealt with trauma catches up. When a person finally feels safe, secure, happy, and loved in a relationship or even a friendship, depending on the closeness, it can lead to a time where they can finally let go of everything. But the time of letting go is a time of when untreated, unresolved troubles and other stuff then creeps in or floods over, and it might push them away or scare them away or cause them to freeze. When everything feels like it's perfect and fine and everything's working out, and then suddenly there's a crash, there's a collapse, maybe because they spent all that time with you and years before masking it. And then when they finally got the green thumbs up, the green light to say it's all okay now, they genuinely feel that it is. But the unresolved stuff takes over in the moment, and it's like being washed away at sea. So unexpected. There are still ways back from that, but as I said, it comes down to communication. It comes down to what both people want and how far they're willing to go within reason. Now, linking with Mikey Lair, any friendships or relationships, how would that apply with the case, with the environment? With Mikey being at a party with people of a similar age or so, in, both males and females, whilst the focus is all about Noah Presgrove and how he interacted with the girls and what he did, and flirting behaviour, alcohol made him more flirtatious and more confident, is what Cade and Pressy said, and so on and so on. What was Mikey like around not just girls, but people of his own gender? Did they gel well? Did they get on well? Was Mikey an outsider? Was Mikey a good friend to the people at the party? Was he a partial friend? I don't know. Because when Cade and Pressy refers to the core friend group, like Saturday going into Sunday morning, the breakfast, it was Brylan, Isaac, Caden, Noah, Jack, Jasmine, Avery, Carter, Logan. That's about 9 people. Did I mention Jasmine Milan? 9-10 people or so. Okay? Of regular friends, close people, supposedly. Shandon Johnson wasn't included because she was only there Saturday. If she stayed there, she might have been included in that list for the Warwick breakfast if they were close friends, right? As for Stephanie Milan, sister to Jasmine Milan, I don't know when Stephanie turned up with her boyfriend, but that aside, the familiar names and faces what we've heard of all hung out from the past to the present at the party involving Noah, like a core social friend group, which is a positive in a way. Understandable why some partygoers and even Caden at the start would find it impossible and hard to believe that those said same faces could do anything to Noah. But beside that, where does Mikey lie within it all? Where does he fit exactly? Was he a close friend or not? I mean, he came on down, so was he invited? Noah Presgrove was contacted by Jack to come back to the party, as in Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening, and that's what Noah did. Maybe, well, from the wrongful death laws, it said that Noah was promised copious amounts of alcohol. I don't know if that meant on the Saturday only, or if it meant again or separately on the Sunday when being persuaded to return back to the party. Who knows? But the story is in the background because Noah didn't have his ride to take down to the party. He got a ride by Gage Jessen, a friend to Jack Newton, and Jack contacted Gage to pick up Noah because Gage was passing on through. Gage Jessen picked up Noah and also picked up Mikey Lair. Now on the sideline, Michael Fazkaz in the community online and some other people supposedly suggested a rumour that Mikey was brought to the party to have a fight with Noah. Strange. A hired gun, hired muscle, Mike Tyson showing the muscle, use him as a mercenary without payment. Oh yeah, because Mikey is the reckless one. Mikey's the unstable one. Mikey's the one with the PTSD, so we can use him and use it as a scapegoat afterwards as a mental health card. Is that what's going to be used to try and excuse it? Was Mikey exploited for his vulnerabilities? Who knows? But if Mikey was brought down to the party for that reason, and you got Mikey and Noah, soon to be later the victim, in the same car as one another, and nothing happened, maybe it wasn't as bad as people made it out to be. Depends on the PTSD, depends on the triggers. Being in an enclosed space in a car with someone else might be triggering to some, to others it might not be whatsoever. Depends on the causes, the effects, and what the past really is. We don't know. So I'm trying to give all the different examples and possibilities as best as I can. When arriving at the party then, was Mikey welcomed? I mean, to be honest, maybe. I don't know the actual friendship connections personally. I think there could well be friends. Maybe not best friends to know, but friends to others, because look at Mikey's interaction with Brylan Sweat. Brylan Sweat introducing Mikey on camera during that snap, and it was positive, joking about one-on-one Mike Tyson. That's what it pretty much said. One-on-one Mike Tyson. Is that implying a one-on-one fight? Anyone want to fight Mikey? Was that before or after the supposed wrestling match with Noah? Because, as I said, beside the triggers, the person's personality and their symptoms in other ways besides the triggers, which can still coexist beside being triggered. Mood swings, behavior, lows, it would be low depressions or hyperarousal, tense, muscles tense, aggression. I said, some people with PTSD, when they're having an episode, a moment, a night terror, or just a flashback, daytime flashback in here, through there, in here, through there, they close up, shut off, clam up, eyes closed or whatever. Their eyes could be open, but they give you 1,000-yard stare. You could be stood in front of them and they can't even see you. You could be talking to them, they can't even hear you because they're so caught up in the moment with something in the past. You reach out to touch them, to say it's okay. They could, react, could slap, could push you away, could hurt you. They don't mean to, and they regret it afterwards. But you're a victim to secondary exposure to another person re-experiencing the trauma. So eventually you develop secondary trauma. Yeah, it could be considered a toxic environment and it could be bad, but that's for those particular situations and struggles. Not all PTSD will end up like that. Other times it could be more psychological. It could be withdrawal, coldness, pulling away, push-pull dynamics, avoidant attachment behavior. And in the process of that, or before it gets to that, some people may be reluctant to engage or push further with a relationship or a friendship because they fear that their push-pull dynamics will only hurt the other person. Or when it's already happening and it's too late, they may realize and think, look at what I've done, look at how I've hurt them. Didn't mean to, was never my plan, but look at what's happened. It doesn't have to end though. That doesn't have to be what defines it all. Because you also got to look back on the foundations, what you built and how long you've known that person for, and remember all the good times despite the supposed bad times. You've got to weigh it up, and it's not just down to the sufferer or survivor to weigh it up, but for the support of the other person to weigh it up too. Providing, once again, there is communication, active communication, to be able to even talk about it and discuss it. If you're denied of that, well then it's a lot harder, and then the ball is in the court of one person over the other. If communication, interaction is cut off, all you can do is respect their space and let them heal or let them freeze out, thaw out, until they feel more regulated and safe again to re-engage with a situation, just with the hopes and fingers crossed that they know how to and they can find their way back. Because if you value it in hopes as much as they do, you'd hope for it to work out in the end. Because in certain circumstances, if you can look past a person's darkness and collateral damage and still see the real them inside of them and offer that support and safety and stability, and they are able to look beyond as well and communicate effectively with time and try, then they can feel and appreciate that, and vice versa at some point. Give, take, support one another when possible, not one-sided. And then that connection and that bond, once broken through that milestone, when broken through those precautionary steps originally, when breaking through it all, shattering through, creating a new timeline, it creates a stronger bond than anything before. And in comparison to other humans out there, stronger than anything else. But it's a long journey. It requires patience and understanding. For Mikey Lair, what was his interactions like and connections with people? Did he get close to people? Was he able to get intimate? And not, in that sense, I don't even know if you consider it, label it as intimate, but just like if you used to give someone a handshake or a fist bump or a tap on the shoulder or a hug or something like that, would Mikey freeze up? Would he tense himself? Would he say, get off me? Would he be reactive, responsive, or was he okay? Considering how Brylan was with Mikey close together, one-on-one, Mike Tyson, they were close in proximity, but that was all. Mikey seemed pretty tame and comfortable, didn't show much expression though. Just know that that's probably really the only photo, the only video that we have of Mikey Lair at the party. We haven't got much to compare with, have we? So like the photos, more so the photos with Noah and Jack, that's limited as well. And videos. With the said events of Noah falling out with Jack or vice versa or two-way, pushing and shoving, aggressive is what Justin had said upon recounting what he heard of others. Comparing it to the photos, you find it hard to believe. They look happy, they look good, get on well. But people can argue, people can have issues and moments. I mean, it's kind of like in it's a private party, but in a public space of people, witnesses about. So if anything did go wrong, other people would see, hear, and note it down like a memory. In other situations, more truly private, one-on-one, in public, portray a perfect couple, a perfect scene, a perfect friendship, a perfect friend group. But then behind closed doors, friends arguing at one another, shouting at one another, pushing and shoving, yelling, toxicity, manipulation, gaslighting, coercion, who knows? Anything really. Portray that perfect picture on the outside, but then behind closed doors, it's far from perfect. The equivalent to like what people do, typical social media influencers with online Instagram compared to how it really looks in real life. Wearing certain sportswear and clothing to hide the layers of fat to make a person look more slimmer, but then when they lower the clothing down just a little bit to make it more realistic, that's how it really looks. By hiding it, by covering it up as a means of self-protection, defense mechanism, set a certain standard and unrealistic expectation, will only lead to a downfall down the line for themselves too. Hiding, covering up, pretending, it only makes the situation harder down the line in different ways. So, with Mikey Lair, with the very, 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 very limited material that we have from the party, we don't actually know what he was like there and the atmosphere. Footage of Noah the centre point, everything seems positive and fine. But from the points of views of other partygoers and how they were, and for the limited time they spent there, we don't know. All we have is stories and hearsay and words from other partygoers and discussions online. And when it comes to Mikey Lair, who was only there Sunday evening, afternoon to early Monday morning, wasn't there as long as other people was, and somehow Mikey got involved in forms of physicality involving Noah Presgrove specifically. So you can see where this is going and why we question it in fairness. With Mikey Lair, first of all, in no particular order, because I don't think it was mentioned in a particular order, but Sunday obviously, and all of it happening Sunday from the looks of it, I believe. Mikey Lair at some point supposedly fish hooked Noah Presgrove, which means standing behind, finger in the mouth and yanking back. Some people do that during intimate moments, but in this case it wasn't anything intimate. Why did Mikey fish hook Noah Presgrove? Because Mikey lost his phone, he couldn't find it, and presumed that Noah Presgrove was responsible. Whether that be linked to PTSD and thinking the worst in someone and being hypervigilant, or it's just Mikey's personality, what caused Mikey to take it out on Noah and assume that Noah was responsible? Is it because Noah messed Mikey around earlier at the party? Because Noah is known as the class joker and clown, so Mikey just assumed, well, Noah must know, he must be responsible, so I'll take it out on him and get the answers. But in the end, it turned out it wasn't Noah. It was actually, it was Caden Pressey on the sofa or on a seat, laying across and mostly covering it accidentally. But Mikey only found out about that once he fish hooked Noah and got bit by Noah. So there's a little bit of tension, a little bit of physicality. Didn't escalate supposedly, but you know, physicality is physicality. Fish hooking someone is quite breaking that personal space by inserting a finger in the hole of somewhere on a person, in this case the mouth, it's like breaching that personal space in a way, and physical. But Noah's, whether it's instinctive or self-defense or playing about, Noah bit Mikey's finger. May have hurt a little bit. Question: if you bite down on someone's finger hard enough, would it cause any teeth inside the person biting to break or loosen? I mean, certain food, what people have, if they bit on something really hard, or if there was a bone, it could damage one of your teeth. One of your tooths. Tooth, you get what I'm saying. Molar tooth would require a great level of something to cause it to break, disconnect, to come out, or loosen. I'm not an expert. Clearly, you can see I'm not a dentist. I might be Dr. Rath, but I'm not an expert in all fields. But no, in all seriousness, can a molar tooth or something like that break from biting down on something really hard? Or does it require a different type of force? I only ask that just because with Mikey's finger getting bitten and Noah, his teeth making contact with Mikey's finger and the bone under the skin. But I guess in fairness, if a tooth was to break under those circumstances, there would be more significant damage to Mikey's finger, likely. Cause and effect, a double-edged sword. You bite on a person's finger, you damage your teeth in the process, but you damage their finger worse, if not more. No mention of decapitation or anything like that, or a finger being lost or stolen. No one lost their finger at the party. But was there any bite marks on Mikey's finger? Any defensive marks interpreted that way? If Noah did it out of a defensive method strategy, could Noah have reapplied that later on the Monday if under attack, if things escalated, if something went wrong? Okay? It's going to get a bit cold. You let me know what you think about that. It's just a theory and idea along the way. Besides that, and Caden being the one to have had the phone, this is what's interesting. Mikey took it out on Noah, then found out it wasn't Noah to blame, it was actually Caden accidentally. Mikey didn't take it out on Caden afterwards, from the looks of it. So that's kind of interesting now. It's like mistaken identity. Oops, sorry, my bad. Who knows if there was any apologies? Maybe there wasn't. Right, I'll take it out on this person now. That wasn't the case. So Noah was wrongfully targeted and no one else was. Seems a bit selective in a way. But it depends. Before or after that, from what Caden said, there was wrestling. And Noah won. Noah beat Mikey real good. And beat not as in attacking, punching, kicking, but beat as in winning. So whatever the wrestling is, the rules, the competition, and how it's done at the house, inside the house, outside the house, Noah supposedly did well. I have mentioned in previous videos, map analysis, that if Mikey Lair ever felt that he was losing, or this so-called claimed one-on-one Mike Tyson is actually losing, would you normally associate Mike Tyson with losing? Maybe not. If Mikey has been given that name, that title, that nickname, and he doesn't live up to the name of Mike Tyson, metaphorically, in that moment as a symbolism, maybe Mikey loses his cool. And depending on what he's exposed to, if there's wrestling or fighting, at first could be fun, then later could go wrong in the moment, or later as something building, bubbling underway, because it might somehow be a trigger to the PTSD, depending. Fighting for your life, play fighting, playfully messing about, and then there's a trigger, there's a line that's crossed. An example of that, roughly speaking, could be amongst friends, or more so the beginning of a relationship, as looking at one another is fine, talking to one another is okay as well. However, when it comes to the moment of getting a bit closer physically, or resting a hand on a leg, or holding hands, that could be a step too far. And with someone with PTSD or CPTSD, it could be way too far. And if the action's performed, maybe the person feels it's the right time, but at the same time they don't know, or they find out and then it's not. Alarm bells, alarms ringing, danger, danger, need to get away, need to back away. That can be a flight mechanic. A fight mechanic could be physically pushing the person away, kicking the person out the house. More aggressive, more confrontational under certain circumstances, because the person in that moment is reenacting, reliving that trauma which they weren't anticipating to happen in the moment. Okay? Pause if you wonder what I'm doing. I'm just adjusting the tripod because for some reason it feels wonky to me, unless that's OCD kicking in. That'd be ironic. But hopefully that makes sense up to now. The way Mikey was at the party for the short period of time he was there was physicality with Noah Presgrove. Was that shared and expressed again on Monday? We don't know because things went dark. We don't have the social media. We don't have the photos. Noah Presgrove walked away at 3:30. At 3:30, what was Mikey Lair doing exactly? Well, at 2:42, when Caden woke up, Mikey Lair was on the floor still. But as we saw from the snap, Mikey, 11 minutes before that, was up on the go, moving about outside. If Mikey comes and goes and sits down and rests, for example, unable to sleep because of his PTSD, he might be preoccupied with other stuff, trying to keep busy, trying to pass time, who knows, hyperactive, different ways of looking at it. If that happened at 3:30, or Mikey was already up and moving about or hanging about outside, may have crossed paths with Noah Presgrove. I don't know if any other partygoers walked away besides Noah. It's always said that Noah Presgrove is always the one to walk away, to distance himself from people. But what about any other partygoers? Did they ever walk away from a party? Did they ever have some quiet time alone to cool off, to calm down, to reflect? Or did they just stick around and stay put regardless? Was it only Noah, the only one to walk away when things got tough or difficult? Not to be interpreted like that as an insult, just, like how people could say. I'm just wondering, because depending what Mikey Lair was like and his activities and patterns, would Mikey be in a certain location which Noah Presgrove would cross paths with? And then there was a confrontation and something went wrong. I don't know if I said it earlier, but sometimes when people cry or get really upset, it's because they know something which another person doesn't, and it might be because they're carrying a weight of guilt, which outweighs everything else, and it causes them to break, crumble partially. Mikey, from what Kane said, was clearly impacted badly by seeing Noah's body. That could well be simply because of the PTSD, re-traumatization of a similar event to the past, which Mikey went through or saw someone else go through. Maybe a friend, a loss of someone, a friend, who knows? Could well be. That crossover, that link. If it's not that, it could be because Mikey knows why Noah is on the highway. Mikey knows what happened to Noah, but having to hold it back, having to hide it within. There might have been some discussions in the past where people were, I'm saying this lightly, just take that in mind, that Mikey may have been scared for his life because he knew of what was up, what happened, but he couldn't talk about it or share it public, because if he did, he could be a target, he could be next. When you know of something, when you are a witness, sometimes people are paid off, and other times people are just threatened with a form of intimidation. Don't say anything, because if you do, you'll lose that person. That person will be taken, kidnapped, abducted. You'll be exposed, blackmail, emotional manipulation. Aspects of that can also link back to trauma from the past, and in toxic friendships, relationships, and all of that. That can have its own consequences and relapses and unpleasant encounters and all that. Things being used against you, things being fabricated against you, forms of gaslighting, coercion, forms of manipulation where the real crazy person, or the one that is mentally not right in the head, that causes all the pain and the suffering towards the victim, the survivor, soon to be. At some point, the bad person, the bad partner, will eventually then play the victim themselves and try and turn the tables to make it seem like that the sufferer is the problem, that the sufferer is the crazy one and is causing all the problems. Role reversal to really mind F the person and confuse them. You know, changing the tables, turning it upside down to form a psychological effect which the other person can't defend against because they weren't expecting it. The unpredictability, but for the wrong reasons, not for the right. That can happen. At a party, if you walk in on something or you're outside and you see or hear it and you're a witness, you want to tell, you want to speak out, but you're threatened that if you do, it could be your life that is removed next, or someone that you know or love is harmed. So you just stay quiet. If dealing with PTSD, dealing with having to put up with a weight that exceeds the weight of the world on your shoulders and dealing with it silently, on top of dealing with PTSD symptoms in general, day-to-day life and functioning, it's more weight on top of more weight. If hiding feelings, hiding PTSD struggles from other people, letting it bubble away under, and it can lead to it spilling out and struggling bad. Pair that with being threatened and blackmailed, could be beyond that pressure. But did that actually lead to Mikey breaking down then? As a direct link, unknown. But from what's been said, Mikey did break down then. So there's something going on at least. But what's happened since? Exactly. You could use that as a counterpoint. But we've looked at the triggers. We've looked at the connection with Noah and how things could have gone. We've looked at the sleep disturbances and patterns which could be associated with PTSD. If Mikey's on the go, on the move, could have been awake, alive, present at the time when Noah was leaving, and they could have crossed paths. Any unfinished business, any unresolved issues, any grudges, tension, anything bubbling under, Mikey took it the wrong way and took it out on Noah, or Mikey just simply up and about, passing time in because of being awake, alive, present and about, witnesses something he wasn't expecting and having no choice but to keep quiet, and the pressure building all this time and scared for his life. Who knows? That's another theory. Partygoers can be innocent as in not being responsible for Noah's death direct, but can be an accomplice in a way as in hiding the truth. They're doing it to protect themselves, they're doing it because they might be actually incapable of reaching out, but at the same time they're denying the justice, denying the progress. That's why sometimes you get put into witness protection and protected by police. Sometimes it works and other times it may not. Did that happen here? Who knows? It's just an idea, a suggestion. Now, what about just the post-news of Noah's death? How did that go down for Mikey? Whether he knew of something before that or not, whether he was directly involved or not, what were the effects like for Mikey? Well, based on Caden's timeline, would it matter the timeline of how Mikey felt? If it was at 5:21 or if it was at 6 in the morning onwards, would it really matter? I guess specifically on the conditions and the basis that Mikey wasn't involved whatsoever, and it was the first time hearing about it. It doesn't matter what time it would be. A traumatic event is a traumatic event, and re-experiencing it as a trigger to something that's happened in the past, doesn't matter what time it happens at, no matter what time of day, it's impactful. It's going to be just as felt as if it was earlier compared to if it was later. It would be the same. That's what I think, at least. You might get some exceptions. With that being in mind, if Mikey is innocent on that basis, comes across Noah for the first time, hearing about the news when at the house, Jack burst through the door, loud bang of the door. Caden said he had to wake the guys up, including Mikey, which doesn't quite fall in line with Mikey, his possible PTSD flashbacks to loud sounds, banging, if that was the case. Sleep disturbances or struggle with sleeping, but Caden had to physically wake Mikey up, even though he's supposedly up and awake all the time from what Jack said earlier, or later at 5:30 on a separate timeline. it doesn't quite align, does it? It doesn't quite gel well together, but that's just how it is, supposedly. So got to take it with a grain of salt, maybe a grain of pepper as well, if you want to mix it up. Ooh, that was my hip clicking just then, in case you wondered. Sorry for the disturbance. But in regard to Mikey hearing about the news for the first time, bit of a shock, denial. Depending on how close he was with Noah, that could have another emotional impact. Maybe he felt worried, concerned, sad. But as bad as that can be, it's when you're there in the moment and you see the person who no longer is alive. That's when it's most raw and impactful for different reasons. It can be the beginning of a traumatic event or the beginning of re-experiencing one similar to what's happened in the past, which started it all off. Because, well, Caden worded it that it was Brylan, I think, that broke down crying, and Caden had to hug him and say it'll be okay. No real mention of Mikey breaking down crying. This is where it becomes a bit more serious. When a person doesn't cry at a moment like that, it doesn't mean to say they're perfectly fine and okay. It could mean that they're much worse off than the person crying in a way, because they don't know how to react. They're still processing it. There's that delay period, and the PTSD slowly eating away, chipping away within. It's that delayed effect, that onset delayed effect, which can be more dangerous, just like secondary drowning. A person drowns, not good. A person drowning, you rescue them, oh, it's all fine now, they're okay. Give it a few minutes or a bit later, and then secondary drowning, the water in the lungs and the body, and if not treated, it could be fatal. A person that bangs, knocks their head, slight injury, slight blood, deep to the bone, a cut on the head, deep down to the skull area, bad enough, it's resolved, it's treated, it's deemed as okay and fine. Give it a few days, give it a few months, give it a bit longer. Could there be any side effects? Whether you've already got PTSD or not, could there be any side effects to that knock on the head? Look at footballers, or as Americans would say, soccer with the cleats. They're playing football, they're heading the ball. Maybe not as much now compared to the past, but heading that ball repetitively can eventually lead to onset dementia. You're not going to know about it in the moment, you're not going to feel it. But that wear and that tear on the head, the brain shaking about inside when heading the ball, something heavy, over time will eventually break the body or a part down. That's why it needs to be treated or adjusted as soon as possible. So, similar with emotions, if Mikey with the PTSD as well is processing or in shock, in denial, going through grief early, who knows, dealing with it in his way or trying to, it might come out differently to other people that are just outright crying and upset. Mikey might be the quiet one that looks like he's coping or putting up with it, getting by, but he's really not. So during a traumatic event or even just daily life, just because a person is somewhat functioning or just existing doesn't mean to say it's all perfect and fine. If they're quiet, that could be a bit of room for concern. They might not be crying, that could be a room for concern. If they can't be intimate or get close to someone, that could be a room for concern. Different ways of measuring it, but not to just jump in and interrogate them. That's not the right way around it. So yeah, got back to the house afterwards from what Ken said, and some went to sleep. Did Mikey though? Could Mikey really sleep, or did he pretend to sleep? Makes you wonder. But what's more telling is afterwards, when Caden said when they were going to leave the party, with Mikey, Brylan and Isaac in the car, Caden driving, from Alicia's point of view, Alicia said that Caden Pressey was crying all the way home. Caden never said that to us, nor in the interview, so where did Alicia get that from exactly? Doesn't make sense. But the atmosphere was quite low and quiet in the car for the journey on the way back home, as you would expect. Caden had said he heard and saw Mikey in like the back seat or so, constantly repeating himself about Noah's death. Like, I can't believe it's happened, Noah's dead. I can't believe it, how is Noah dead? You know, like that. That's outright pure shock, almost like shell shocked. Sometimes a person could be crouching, fetal position, head, hands on knees, crouched, hands covering ears, hands covering face, really tensing up, shaking, scared, whatever, or just talking in a monotone voice and repeating themselves over and over and over and over again. Clearly, they're not well. They probably are struggling. But in that moment, and if you've not dealt with it, you might not know what to do or say. So for a person crying to a person then repeating themselves over and over again, some deep lying trauma and possible re-emergence of it from the past. Whether they've coped, dealt with it in the past, whether it's a first time relapse, who knows? It's probably being felt. It's just that you could argue and say, based on how Mikey reacted and what happened past that point with Noah's death could link to something that Mikey faced in the past before the party, which involved death or the loss, or equally the loss of someone. That's what I think, in my opinion, only. Now, after Mikey being dropped off with either Brylan or Isaac, they must be friends or they must know each other to be dropped off at the same place. Who knows what happened then? But later into the case and community, when learning about it, people in the community had said that, as for Mikey Lair, he ended up in a psychiatric ward or some hospital, psychiatric related. Why? Why exactly? Because he's terrified of what he's done to Noah. The weight has crushed him finally. The guilt has got to him because he knows what happened and has hidden the truth for this long. Or is it just simply because a possible innocent, young, impressionable partygoer exposed to alcohol, exposed to possible triggers at the party, and then ultimately seeing a friend or someone you somewhat know dead on the highway under those circumstances, so traumatic, and then reliving the past because of already dealing with PTSD, coping with it all in the moment, not quite having the maybe medication to support it or the network support groups in the moment to deal with it, having to suffer in silence or cope as one thinks is best but not ideal. No wonder why they ended up in a psychiatric ward or a possible hospital. It was intervention. It was room for concern. If a family member or a friend stepped in, or if they did it themselves, who knows? But it's no surprise. And, look, some people could say, well, if Mikey Lair ended up in a psychiatric hospital, why did no other partygoer then? Surely they would have too. Well, were other partygoers dealing with such deep internal psychological issues before Noah's death, like Mikey was? Maybe not. Okay, Carter, I think, is it Carter or Avery? One of the girls had a car crash a week before or so. Pretty bad. Did that cause them trauma or issues or problems? Who knows? That's not being talked about or made clear, so we don't know. As for Jasmine Milan and the mentions of her mental health, that wasn't referred to as in before the party. It was mentioned as in post Noah's death and in 2024, I think. So when you're dealing with someone that's already got a history of trouble and mental health issues, and then attending a party and then dealing with Noah's death, that's going to be much greater in weight, much greater in, struggles compared to someone that is dealing with it for the very, very first time and hasn't dealt with any problems before that. It's not a competition, but it's just about ordering and making sense of how different people react due to the state conditions that they're currently in and facing. Mikey going to a party could have been a distraction from his daily life or what was going on that day or the night before, who knows? People can act and react in many different ways, Some people may overwork themselves into the ground, even if it's not practical, which could lead to physical, emotional burnout down the line. And by overworking, mentally, physically exhausting themselves, and not spending less time with family members, friends, even relationships. They're trying to cope with what they're dealing with. If a person isn't working, isn't able, or doing other stuff in between, they may redirect their focus and fixate or focus heavily on a hobby and activity, a workout, going to the gym, and while something like that could be considered positive and healthy, if they do it over and over and over and over again and overwork themselves in those ways, well, that can be detrimental just as much as working a job and working more than you should be. in a way. So you've got to take that into consideration. As well, with Mikey's age at the time, 16, 17, he would be still in high school or so. Whether he has a part-time job or not, wouldn't know personally. But just by going to a party, doesn't always have to be overdoing it or overworking yourself. It could just be going to a party for a one-time experience, or in the moment, even participating in drinking alcohol, even if you're not supposed to and you're a minor or you're under the legal age, doing something to escape something, engaging in an activity, whether it's something you really want to do or something that's just slightly better off, as a better option than what you're currently facing. Sometimes it's a one-off thing, other times it's a consistent, prolonged reaction, overworking, isolating, freezing, and the person deep down doesn't really want to, but they feel they have to. A person that's hyper independent because they've been let down too much in the past by others, so it's easier if they take on board all responsibilities, all efforts, all focus, everything on their shoulders. It naturally adds more pressure, can lead to them getting ill in different ways and exhausted, but in the time being and in the moment they feel that it's right for them and it's best, because if they try and rely on anyone else, they'll only be let down like how they were in the past, and that'll just lead to more disappointment, sadness, frustration, and anything else like that, especially when dealing with PTSD or CPTSD. So many different crossovers. And as I said, sometimes a person who greatly fears something, deep down, might be the same thing that they deeply desire. A person that feels that what's best for them, what they think, is the opposite of what they really think what's best for them and what they really need deep down within. Easier to push people away and self-isolate and claim it as a form of self-control and to gain peace and silence, but deep down at that cost, they know that it's not exactly what they want or what they truly want. Instead, they want the opposite. What they want: noise, they want warmth, they want frequency, they want tone, they want depth, they want reassurance, they want consistency, they want stability, they want you to be able to show up, they want some kind of anchor to lean on, they want a light within their dark world, they want the reassurance which they never had, they want everything that they never had, or they want lots of stuff that they felt was taken from them at some point previous. But they may never let on to that because it feels like such a weight that they may fear scaring a person off or appearing too needy. But at the end of the day, they are not needy. They are deserving of it all. They may just not feel that they are deserving of it. They may feel and know that the person they're around is capable of giving it all and all that, but they themselves may not feel as equal. Once again, communication is needed to an extent. It may not happen immediately, but it can with time. I said, with Mikey Lair, the psychiatric ward hospital, clearly the death of Noah really did get to him and impact him, likely based on the timeline of it. Maybe Mikey may have spent time in there before the party, when dealing with the original PTSD, whatever that was. Might not be the first time, you never know. Fast forward onwards, as I said a bit earlier in this video, Mikey Lair was involved in co-joint robbery, which might have involved a stolen car vehicle. Why would Mikey do that? Who knows? We don't really know the full motive, but does PTSD tie in? Well, you can't use PTSD to excuse everything, every reaction, of course, but I'm just wondering, going down a route of crime or doing a certain act, is that as a means of trying to regain a level of self-control after losing it in the past, gaining back something that was never yours, gaining back, taking away from someone, revenge? Revenge can take place as well. Sometimes people with PTSD and other issues who may have gone through trauma, or more so may have gone through bullying in high school, bullying in life, or domestic situations behind closed doors. They may suffer at the hands of it, and they're a victim to it, but they're also a survivor if they push through. But at some point, things may change and they may become the bully towards someone else. So you got a bully, they bully you, You feel the pain. It hurts and impacts you. And then at some point, you might become the bully to someone else. And it's like a food chain. It passes on down, a chain reaction sometimes. So if you've got control, you've got psychological, physical hurt, pain, and you've gone through that, a person that's experienced that in the past may then, within consciousness, use it against someone else to get revenge. Revenge towards an innocent person that's not done anything wrong. But in the eyes of them, they're either visualizing it as getting back at a person from the past, but taking it out on someone completely different, but mapping it out as if it's the same exact person. Like we said, if a person was going through an episode or a moment where everything that they see and hear reminds them of an ex best friend, a family member. So when a good person, a familiar person shows up with voice, touch and all that, the one struggling isn't going to identify or differentiate from differentiate from reality to the unnatural stuff going on. So with that being in mind, taking it out on the wrong person, in that case, not directly by choice and not done with intent, but with the situation of revenge, trauma, taken out on someone with a form of intent, but the wrong person, it being taken out on. Not that trauma leads on to more trauma or someone else's trauma, but one act, one moment of revenge to gain back control, revenge to get justice for what someone did to you, whether they're still around to face the justice or not. If they're not around to face the justice, it might be more driven, motivated in that sense. Are we saying that could have been motivated as in Noah's death and Mikey did something to Noah as a form of gaining back control or revenge from the past? Who knows? You could argue that. But in terms of this crime, robbery, stolen car, is that unlike Mikey to do something like that? Maybe because it links back to Noah's death. It set off a dark path, going down a different pathway from where they were supposed to be going. Losing control or changing sense of reality, disassociating, lines being blurred between what's right, what's wrong. At a younger age, could be possible. Environment, things around him, how things are handled, who knows. Got to talk about medication as well, whether it applies to the party, if it applies post-death of Noah, at any point, and more likely when coming out of the hospital and spending time in the psychiatric ward, obviously on medication, first time, or it being brought back in, who knows. Being given different types of medication for the PTSD, could be sertraline, could be amphetamol, I can't say the word, begins with an A, amphetamol or something, and then some others can be used to resolve issues, other episodes, depression, migraines and other things like that, but then it can also co-treat other issues like PTSD, for example. I don't know all the medication, but the end result is, with medication, it can fix one problem, it can then open up a completely different problem. Side effects of the medication could lead to nauseous, very sleepy, passing out. It could lead to feeling sick. It could lead to headaches. It could lead to dizziness. It could lead to feeling like a zombified state, and sometimes it might encourage the person down the line to stop taking the medication because they want to feel alive again, but at the cost of the PTSD flare-up and the symptoms coming back. When a person stops taking their medication, which they were supposed to be taking in the first place, it's not a good idea. But to them, they just want to feel something. To them, they may be sick and tired of constantly putting pills in and swallowing every single day and night, but it's by doing that is what keeps them a little bit more stable, but maybe at the cost of feeling other things. It's a double-edged sword. To feel better, to get a bit better, you've got to take medication, but it may not feel like things are getting well because you've got to get worse before you get better at times, like medication for it to kick in. Other times, by taking the medication for it to fix one thing, for it to cause another problem, it might feel like 2 steps forwards, 1 step back. But it's important to remind the person struggling that, whilst yes, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, a negative has occurred, or it feels like a setback, you've made more progress than you've lost progress at times, if that's how it's been interpreted. So that could be used as a form of perspective to help them. So could Mikey Lair have committed crimes or reacted in a certain way at the party if he had been taking medication and it led to side effects, depending on the type of medication and if they were on it at the time? But in fairness, if there's alcohol present and medication, that's a no-no. Now, what I can remember, Eric Harris, Columbine, 1999, Colorado, beside Dylan Klebold, in which Dylan Klebold looked like one of the, oddly, football players from a photo of Noah Presgrove case with the curly ginger hair. I don't know if anyone remembered that. That was really creepy, that resemblance, but unrelated. But with the Columbine 1999 mass shooting at a high school, one of the shooters, known as Eric Harris, was bullied a lot at that school back then, and it resorted to retaliating back. Well, psychologically, they may have not been right. They still had a reason, motive behind it. Nowadays, with school shootings, it's not because they were bullied, it was because they're just dealing already with psychological issues. When you got a person that is somewhat okay, but then they're treated like an animal and broken down and then develop issues, prod, poke, poke, what do you expect when there's retaliation? Got to give and take, but there was still collateral damage, which is unfair. Why does this matter? Because Eric Harris had a history of taking certain medication to treat some of his issues. I think it was depression or something. Was it Zoloft? I can't remember the medication name. But at the cost of taking it, it led to some side effects, intensified aggression and possible rage. You're treated bad, you're bullied, and that still goes on, and you want revenge, and now you've got aggression, you've got that energy behind it, dark aggression, going to push you over the edge. If he didn't take the medication, would it have led to a school shooting? Who knows? Dylan Klebold, I don't think he was on medication or the same, but still followed along with it. But whilst Dylan was the more brighter one, the taller one, and got more attention under Eric Harris, the connection that they had and the alienation as well, and there might have been a little bit of indoctrination, followed the lead and went through with it. So it could have been different, but it's that what could have sent him over the edge, as in Eric Harris, the shooter, was that medication, the side effects from it. You look at the Alyssa Bustamante case, I think it was 2015, or it might have been 2013. It was some time ago. What I do know is I believe Alyssa Bustamante at high school, 15 years of age at the time, ended up luring her sister's friend into the woodland and used a knife and finished her off multiple times and made a grave as well. The thing is, with Alyssa Bustamante, they were struggling psychological long before, and they started taking medication, and the side effects were, I think, depression and dark thoughts and stuff like that. So it didn't do them much good. And they were pleading that it wasn't good for them and it was causing issues. And they were forced and encouraged to keep taking the medication, despite her making it clear it's not good for her. Took it, side effects, changed who they were. Doesn't justify it all, doesn't excuse it all, but it plays a role. Changes in behaviour, how they act and react. The motive behind Alyssa Bustamante ending the life of her younger sister's best friend was because her younger sister's best friend was actually bullying Alyssa's sister. Bullying, retaliation, bit of a theme and pattern there. Side effects from taking medication, links. Doesn't justify it all, but still needs to be observed. But I think there was a slight thing where Alyssa had 2 graves made in the woodland forest, and when the younger sister came across it, or maybe the younger sister's best friend before they were taken out saw it, they questioned, why are there 2 graves? Why would there need to be 2 graves exactly? I believe from what I can remember, I think the younger sister to Alyssa actually walked in on it happening, or the after effects going into the woodland, and then questioned why there were 2 graves. If Alyssa was truly only getting like revenge, avenging her younger sister for the bullying. For one person, there'd be one grave. To have two graves, was she considering taking someone else out? If so, that could be even more sinister and dark. But it's just side effects, events, other cases which I can remember. Basically true crime, Sam. I'm just wondering if Mikey Lair, if he did take medication, if it did lead to any side effects, if it did lead to any links. You can let me know if you agree or not in the comment section. Beside all that, as for treatment when it comes to PTSD and CPTSD, there's a lot of depth there for a separate video, I guess. But obviously, medication would be one of them, taking the right medication and consulting the right people and the doctors and all that. I'm not going to go into too much depth because it seems a bit, well, not self-explanatory, but I'm not able to provide all that expertise and all that because I'm not in a position. But in terms of the practical forms of help, that could be CBT, cognitive behavioural therapy, supportive therapy, which is primary, secondary caregivers, support systems, friends, partner, and all that, and EMDR, also known as eye movement desensitization reprocessing. So CBT can be used for PTSD, but not everybody with PTSD will respond well to CBT, and it won't work for everyone. So whilst it works for one person, it may not for another, so you've got to find different ways about it. A person may not respond well to listening to a therapist, but they may respond well to supportive therapy, like a support group or a partner or a friend, providing it's done within reason and that there are boundaries. Listening to a familiar voice, a tone, a frequency can bring comfort, relaxation, peace, lowering the guard, and gently dealing with some of the issues at hand, providing it's done within reason. Not to fix the person, but there to support them, to try and help themselves, and so on. CBT can link in with the supportive therapy because it's really to do with challenging the thoughts, giving people the guidelines, the tools to work with, and not taking over yourself as the therapist or the supportive one, but challenging the thoughts. So whenever they have a form of denial, they have a form of self-doubt, a form of self-loathing, if it is CPTSD, if they feel hopeless, if they feel guilt, if they feel to blame or responsible for a traumatic event in the past, for example, CBT is you have a calm conversation with them, get to learn about it, allow them to open up, be relaxed, of course, learn, ask a few questions, and challenge, but not direct. Not telling them what to do, not ordering them, but just suggesting a different perspective, which they've never considered before. Just like this case and mystery. Some people can be set in their ways and think that they know best or think they've covered every angle. I could come in and say, have you considered this by any chance? Have you considered that, whilst people like to push the idea of phones and data being wiped, you do have the odd party goer that from that video, what we saw of Pepe Graham and Mikey Lair under the traffic barrel, it shows the playback button, it shows the settings and the options, which isn't from Snapchat, it's actually from the default internal phone storage, meaning if phones were wiped, that video would be wiped as well. And if it was backed up or stored afterwards and then retrieved later from the cloud, it would be retrieved back to the default storage gallery. Well, if that was the case, the people that wiped it wouldn't be reclaiming it and then resharing it public, would they? Either way, if it's wiped for a reason. But there is evidence and material that it's not. Some people are like, oh shit, I get what you mean now. Yeah, never thought of that. Exactly. Take that into mind with the CBT. With a person with PTSD going through an episode, a low, recovering from one, giving them the time to breathe and think before you step in and question them, so it's not like an interrogation, and going at their pace, their flow, and just simply giving an alternative theory and a perspective. You don't treat them like a case subject, you don't treat them like a case, you don't treat them like a patient, you treat them as a friend or you treat them as your partner, and keep it simple. But in regard to giving an alternative theory, an alternative idea, if you've covered true crime or mysteries, in terms of how you suggest things, you could use that same mentality towards them, but on a more familiar basis with closer things you're talking about and what they may be feeling, okay? You can't just say to them, get over it, or time heals. That won't help, that'll make things worse. But if a person said, you know what, I've dealt with intelligent people in the past, dealing with it now can be triggering because it reminds me of the past, it can be scary. A person with intelligence can come with a great level of responsibility, and if they misuse it, it can be detrimental to the other person's health, physically, psychologically. You could step in and provide a perspective and say, well, first of all, a person you may have been with in the past who supposedly is super intelligent, clearly they aren't that intelligent for them to treat you the way they did, because you're deserving of a lot better. If they're so intelligent, then clearly they couldn't see what was really in front of them, meaning they're not that intelligent. Some of that can be supported. It's got to be said and meant, of course. You can't just say it to help. You've got to say it because you mean it. But some of it can challenge their thoughts, their doubts. Some of it can be in a supportive, friendly way. It's got to be done in a controlled setting, though, so it doesn't come across as too biased. Because if it's a friend, if it's a family member, if it's a partner, giving that supportive therapy, it might be deemed as biased. And the sufferer, survivor, may think, you're doing it because I know that you mean well and you care, but because of that biasness, sometimes what's said is emotionally driven, not critically driven. And it needs to be critically driven. If there's a way to disconnect emotionally, but to give a briefing and a debriefing before doing it, to make them alert and aware as to why you're talking in a monotone voice, or why it looks like you are cold or emotionless, because you're trying to disconnect, to think objectively within reason. As long as they know the process and it's all laid out, it could be a method, one method at least, depending on the severity of it all. As for eye movement, desensitization, reprocessing, combination of stuff can be worked with CPTSD, but it requires a little bit more effort and time to break down the barriers to make sure that they're comfortable, so they're more relaxed. But more so like with PTSD, the eye movement form is where sat down, relaxed, another person may use a light, a torch, shine it in the eyes gently, or move it from left to right, or use an object left to right and make the person focus on it. It's not hypnosis then. It's where you're told to do something gently. Look to your left, look to your right. Keep your head face still, but move your eyes left and right to whatever pattern, beat, or motion that the other person tells you to do, like a professional, in a calm, controlled way. Whilst using that movement, that eye movement, slight tapping sounds and senses in the background, which are familiar with the body, to touch into the density and the frequency of the mind and the body itself, almost like building some kind of like energy wave bandwidth of familiarity. That's why I say the hertz, I think, of a cat purring can re-regulate a person's nervous system and calm them, or the sound of a heart beating can re-regulate a person's nervousness, keeps them calm. So if a person struggling was to rest their head on someone's chest, heart, hearing that could regulate things and calm them down, providing you do it with someone that you know and not a complete stranger for that connection. I mean, I can purr like a cat myself. I mean, I'm not going to work here, but something like that. A real cat would work, but if you can purr yourself, that could help calm someone, their senses, their nervous system. And with the CPTSD, those sensory experiences and frequencies and tones and wavelengths are what's needed. So with the eye focus, focusing on one thing, the other senses which may be untouched or tense, being relaxed or distracted, it's like distracting different parts and areas of the body and the mind internally to dig in deep to the internal problem within reason, and to do it effectively so the person is calm and willing to open up, answer questions, to talk about their trauma, to go through it bit by bit while still focusing on eye movement, looking up, looking down, looking left, looking right, maybe talking about what they feel, what they see, what are the 5 things you see around you, what are the 4 things you hear, what are the 3 things you can feel, what are the 2 things you can taste, what's the 1 thing you're thinking of right now. all done to try and distract the mind from something else that's going on internally. It's like finding a backdoor entry. If a person was struggling to have an injection in a hospital, they might be distracted with a funny face, a funny sound, and then, oh, they've already got done, injected. Being distracted to bypass the internal external shield and barriers of that struggling individual. Keeping the mind activated, keeping the eyes, which are the optic, the windows to within, distracted but open. Keeping the other senses, touch, hear, sound, any perceived threats, distracted, calmed, tamed by relaxing sounds of familiarity, sounds which you can relate to as a form of safety and reassurance. And then asking the deeper questions, because the defense barrier is down, the threat level is low. You can get through to people and ask the stuff, and then they can talk about it, or maybe a bit of form of CBT crossover in the process. It's like a form of hypnosis, but you're not actually putting them in a trance. You're just calming them down to be able to penetrate through within reason. That can be done in a more casual, less intensive way of used to do role play with someone. Role playing through the eyes, putting yourself in the shoes of another person, a third person character which actually resembles them, but they forget that it's them and it's someone else. Putting yourself in the shoes of someone else and asking them, what would that person do? What would that person say? What does that person want out of it? What does that person think right now? And then they will say, well, I think that person actually wants this and wants that. And I think that person may be worried of going too far because of the loss, the cost, and the past. Speaking in third person to bypass that defense mechanism. That particular one is a strategy that I thought of myself. But I can see how it can link on indirectly to the EMDR. Okay? Whether these methods have been applied to Mikey Lair, or they could be in the future, or they could be applied in general. It's just what I thought of and remember, and with some research along the way. But just so you know, as a witness, everything that has been said today, most of it in here, the length of time 3 hours. Let me show you the notes with what I've been working with. I know it's back to front, but look, that's it. 3 hours and that's it. It's from in here and it's natural with the flow because it needs to be. Do I think Mikey Lair's PTSD links to Noah's death? Not enough evidence to probably suggest that. But do I think Mikey Lair's PTSD was re-triggered and the effects were felt much worse than anyone else because of already experiencing the past and then Noah's death? I would say yes, definitely. As for how things are now, who knows, because we've not really seen any updates since. But hopefully this video helps. As for any symbolisms along the way, mentioned earlier about when it comes to connections, when it comes to friendships, when it comes to family, when it comes to relationships, the freeze, the clamming up, the avoidant behavior. At times a person may feel it's hard to return back, to reach out, to reconnect because too much time has passed by. They fear or worry that they've hurt or broken the person that they loved the most and they never set out in hurting someone, but because they have or they felt they already have, they don't want to return back to see the damage what they think they've caused, or be questioned, be interrogated. They don't want to go through any of that because it adds to more stress and pressure on top of what they're dealing with. All that can be said as a form of introspection, as a form of perspective. If a connection at the start and so far in before things went wrong or things got too real, a person would have to remind themselves, even make a list of all the positives on paper, what you feel, what you experience, how that person makes you feel, how that person treats you, positive times, feelings internally, dreams, and so on. Then on a separate piece of paper, write out any negatives, as in what they may have made you feel accidentally, with intent or whatever. Positives, negatives, to weigh it up within reason. And then a separate sheet of paper to write down what you think, what you feel, what you want, what you need, despite whether it's possible or impossible, to write it down, to compare, contrast notes, to share with the other person if contact could be made, and if not, just to internally reflect upon it, to remind yourself the past is the past, but the troubles that came over are important and still present to this day. But the present or possible future with someone is still possible if it's truly meant to be, and if it's worth fighting for, and if the positives outweigh the negatives, if the light outshines the darkness, and if what's being written down on paper and initially, if however they made you feel inside upon first impressions and it was positive, and you still felt that every other day or into the future, then it could well be safe and it could well be worthwhile. But you don't just jump in or re-jump back in. There still needs to be communication. There may need to be change. There may need to be adjustments. Because if there's a breakdown in communication, there will be isolation both ways, and it won't go anywhere. It will seem impossible. It will seem beyond impossible. But that's why you've got to write it down, provide the perspective, self-perspective, retrospection, and weigh it up ultimately. Is it worthwhile or not? Is deep down, you know it's worth it. Deep down, you know they're the one. Deep down, you know that person is good for you, right for you. It's just all the barriers and obstacles and invisible stuff and demons and all that along the way and in between, which gets in the way. But if you write down their strengths, besides the weaknesses, if you write down what their strengths are as a person and what they've done for you, take that in consideration as to what they can do for you and how they can support you. And ultimately, if you can weigh it out like a roadmap, as in they've done more for you than what the other person has ever done in their entire life, that's a positive. And if they have the capacity, they're consistent, frequent, that could help. There are certain examples or patterns that could be written down if you was to perceive someone that way. Of course, the defense mechanisms are already trusting someone back then and it went wrong. Trusting someone again could feel impossible and like a vase. But the other thing that could be written down as a form of perspective is stick to what you do or what you think is best or what feels is needed, whether you really want it or not. It's best if you isolate. It's best if you don't do this. Best if you don't do that. Is it best for you? Is it best for them? Is it what they really want? Because not as a form of self-punishment, not as a form of self-blame, but the other person may think very highly of the survivor or struggler, but they may not see it themselves within themselves. But vice versa, the other person may not think much of themselves, but the struggling person may put the other person on a pedestal for how much better they are as a person compared to the past. Both people could end up being struggling in different ways, or both people could look up to one another in different ways. If that gap can be bridged and get closer and share more in common, then that understanding can be more and deeper. If there's patience as well, that can show as well. But yeah, hopefully it didn't go on too long. I don't know about the audio. Oh boy, if there was any crackling or not. I don't know if I'll edit it or not. It depends on the timing, the length of time and stuff. Fingers crossed it's okay. But with that all being said, Noah Presgrove case, there isn't just one victim, there's more than one victim. Even though some people in the army page like to push the certain agenda, there's more to it, there's more depth. So if you found the video somewhat interesting, be sure to hit the thumbs up, share the video, that'd be appreciated. If you want to check the playlist out for the full videos, feel free to do so. But I think we'll leave it there for now. I don't think there might be much more to say about it, but I just hope the video made sense, and hopefully the video wasn't too intense for people. As I said, you don't have to watch it all, or you can rewind back or pause it on and off. Might be a bit late saying that now, but if you watch the start of the video, I did give a disclaimer, okay? So thanks for watching. Shout out to those that have watched and in the background. I'll see you next time. Goodbye and good night for now.